Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, July 20th. I'm Board Chair Kelly McNicholas Curry. Also here in the room with me is Francie Jacober. Patty Clapper is visiting family this week and will miss our meeting today. And then joining us from home are Commissioners Greg Poshman and Steve Child joining us from Alaska. And thanks for being with us from so far away.
Hey guys, some pictures up on the wall here.
Kelly, I can't hear you.
Oh.
There's Molly and me at Carnegie Hall a couple of years ago.
All right, Craig, can you hear me now? Grassroots, were you able to catch all that? Okay. All right, so sorry folks on Zoom. We're kicking off our work session here on July 20th. And I think if you were at home on Grassroots, you heard our intros, but welcome. Nice to see everyone today. It's pretty quiet here in the room. And we have Rich Engelhardt joining us as Deputy County Manager. And then for our first order of business, we have David Pesnicek, who is our Transportation Administrator, to start us off on our agenda this afternoon. We will get prepared for our joint elected officials Transportation Committee meeting that will take place next Thursday with our colleagues in Snowmass Village and the City of Aspen. So David, I'll turn it over to you. Nice to see you.
You too, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get my screen shared here. Oh. There we go.
All right, looks good.
All right, I am David Pesnicek, Regional Transportation Administrator with the Elected Officials Transportation Committee. And this is the preparation meeting for next Thursday's full EOTC meeting on July 29th. I've got a number of items I'd like to cover here this afternoon. The first being basic meeting logistics for next Thursday. The second one is running through the EOTC decisions reached from the last EOTC meeting, which was March 25th, as well as a review of the highlights from the updated EOTC IGA that was also passed last meeting. The third item is a brief overview of the two action items coming up next Thursday. The first one is the 2021 EOTC Near-Term Transit Improvement Program, which is a culmination of the Integrated Mobility System Study and the Upper Valley Transit Enhancement System Study. And the second action item is the Maroon Creek Roundabout Reconstruction 2022 CDOT funding request. And then lastly, I'm not going to go through each of the update items in the packet, but I do have a slide here for some time to answer any questions you might have on the memos for those update items. So diving into the logistics for next Thursday, this will be hosted by Pickens County here in this room in the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners room. It's scheduled to start at 4 p.m. This will be a combination of in-person and virtual. The virtual option will be available to everybody, so you all will receive a panelist link a few days before the meeting, whether you're attending in person or virtually. But this is the first meeting where we don't officially have a limit to the number of people who can attend in person, so that's exciting. We are still trying to maintain some social distance though, so are still encouraging people, if they, board members in particular, if you are able to and willing to attend virtually, to go ahead and do that.
Do you mind if I just check in with our board to see what people plan to do? Is that okay?
Yep. Yeah, that was actually the next thing I was going to ask was to see
okay.
one, who is planning on attending, and if you were planning on attending virtually and in person, just so we can prepare appropriately.
All right, we'll start in the room. I will be here in this seat to chair the meeting for all of us. Francie.
And I will be here in whatever seat Kelly tells me to sit in that night.
Okay. And Steve and Greg, we'll check in with you. What are your plans?
I'm not certain yet. I think I'm going to plan on being there.
Okay.
So I will be attending virtually if I'm able to attend. There's some day, and we haven't figured it out yet, when I need to get myself to Anchorage, which is a 7-hour drive. So we don't know yet. We haven't figured out the logistics, but it might be that day. I'm trying to make all the meetings and not miss any of them. I'm planning on being there. but there's a possibility that I might have to be on the road riding and with no internet.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We'll check in with you next week to find out your plans a little more. I think there will be some food, so if that entices you, Greg, to come in person.
David, I have a quick question. Have you sent a Google invitation to that yet?
We have not sent those out yet. So you'll still receive a Zoom link probably a couple days beforehand.
But, and it'll go on into my calendar, because I think I just have my own little thing about it on my calendar, not the official one.
If you are not on the list, I can make sure that I get you added to that. The calendar invite does not have a link to join, so the link to join will come a couple days beforehand. Just we found that it gets lost in people's emails if we send it too early.
Okay, thank you.
So,
All right. Well, moving on then to the decisions reached from March 25th. As you may recall, the last meeting, the EOTC adopted an updated governance and decision-making IGA. This IGA was unanimously adopted with a couple of amendments. Those amendments were made to the IGA document, and that document was executed and is currently in place and dated May 3rd, 2021. So the document itself, the IGA, is available on the EOTC website, but if you would like, let me know and I can email it to you as well. For the decisions reached, I did want to point out that there were some errors that Patty Clapper had pointed out to me, that I had failed to update the roster list. So I still had George Newman and Marky Butler on the list. So I apologize, Francie, for missing that. But the version you have in your packet is still the old version. It is updated in the version that in the official version.
okay.
So just so you know that has been done. And then I did want to touch on a couple I guess, highlights from the IGA update. And those main changes, so this will be the first meeting that this new IGA will be in place. And the two main changes are related to the quorum as well as meeting outcomes. So if you recall, the EOTC now has a quorum requirement. That quorum requirement is essentially that a majority of the membership from each of the parties be present in order to hold an EOTC meeting. So that for each of the jurisdictions, that means 3 members need to be present in order to progress with the full meeting. If a quorum cannot be achieved, the EOTC does have 3 different options. It can be continued to a date certain from that meeting that has been advertised, where we believe that we would be able to achieve a quorum. The second option is to adjourn and reschedule and redo public notice. And then the third option is if we have a matter that's time sensitive, we can take it around to each of the individual jurisdictions to be heard individually and voted on individually. So those are our 3 options if we do not have a quorum at one of the fully regularly scheduled EOTC meetings. And then the last...
Dave?
Yep.
Attending in person or virtually counts. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yep. In person or virtual.
So just want to make sure that's specified. Thank you.
And so, and who do you need from the BOCC to make just one person, or, I'm sorry, I lost my intention there for a second.
We need at least 3 board members present,
3.
either virtually or in person.
Okay.
And then the decisions at the OTC meeting are now final. So you might notice, so one of the action items does have, and I'll talk about this later, does have draft resolutions for the town and city. You'll continue to see those from now on because the decisions at the OTC meeting will be final, and that will authorize signature on those documents. So keep an eye out for those whenever there's a document to be signed.
I do have a question about that. Does our process not require that? A similar resolution?
This one, for this action item on next Thursday is slightly different for the county because it's a budget item.
Okay.
So because the county administers the OTC budget, it's a slightly different process just for the county.
And then for your purposes, since I'm chairing next week, will we need to take a voice roll call vote? Like a roll call vote, or is a voice vote sufficient?
A voice vote is sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Or, sorry, a voice roll call vote. So roll call at the beginning. Sorry, I think I
Yeah, no, it'll just,
misstated my
maybe we
response
can
there.
talk offline, but it'll help, maybe I'll call it each jurisdiction to
Yeah, to
so-
just confirm who's there.
separately, so
Yeah.
if they have three. Okay, got it, thank you.
And then the other item I wanted to highlight here was that we do have a decision-making process, and this is the overview chart from the IGA that you may recall. So there's 4 different decision processes that the EOTC can go through. One is the Comprehensive Valley Transportation Plan. The second one is expenditures and budgets. Third one is supporting documents and plans, and the fourth one is administrative direction. So the first 3 are fairly similar in that they all require agreement between each of the parties and then a signed resolution. The fourth one, administrative direction, only requires agreement by the 3 parties but is not memorialized in a resolution at the end of the day. Any other questions about that just before I move on to the action items for next Thursday?
I don't see
Okay.
any.
So the first action item that we have coming up is the 2021 Near-Term Transit Improvement Program. And this is the title given to the staff recommendation that is the outcome of 2 studies that concluded this past month in June. So the first one is the Integrated Mobility System, or IMS, study that was conducted by Farron Peers, and the second one is the Upper Valley Transit Enhancement, or UVTE, study that was conducted by Mead and Hunt. This staff recommendation is intended to provide direction to staff for development of the annual EOTC work plan, direction to staff for development of the annual EOTC budget, and direction to staff for procurement of grants and other assistance. So the recommendation is that this be adopted as administrative direction. So if you recall from the previous slide, that is agreement between the 3 entities but not formalized in a final resolution. The Near-Term Transit Improvement Program itself is intended to prioritize actionable next steps in the near term. So this is intended to be a near-term view of things that we can start tackling. So more or less the lower hanging fruit, if you will. So what we have in there are 16 projects that are prioritized into 3 tiers. These tiers are Tier 1, which are highest value to dollar ratio and/or are important preliminary efforts. Tier 2 are lower value to dollar ratio or dependent on a Tier 1 effort. And then Tier 3 are hold status projects, and these are on hold because of dependence on efforts outside the EOTC purview, or they have a significant cost or a significant legal hurdle that we believe requires further discussion amongst the EOTC before progressing down that direction. And then we have a 4th category. This is other efforts considered, and we wanted to have this in here to document that we did look at these, but we didn't prioritize them, and they're not prioritized for a number of different reasons. And then the projects within each of the tiers are not prioritized. So I think it's important to note that when you're looking at this, they're listed in order because we have to put them in in a spreadsheet of some sort, but they're not intended to be prioritized within each of the tiers. And that's to allow that flexibility so that we don't end up in a situation that says, okay, we've got a partnership or a funding opportunity on project number 3, but we really need to work on number 1 first. We wanted to have the flexibility to be able to respond appropriately to opportunities that come up, and didn't want to be overly hamstrung in terms of that forward momentum. And then the Transit Improvement Program also, each of these projects are intended to be formally programmed on an annual basis. So they would come before the EOTC as a part of the annual work plan and annual budget, and they would be prioritized at that time and memorialized in a resolution for that next year's work plan or appropriate budgeting. And that would be prioritized based on available funding, partnerships, workload, and capacity, as well as relative compliance to the strategic plan and comprehensive valley transportation plan. So if you recall from the last budget cycle, and you might have noticed within the next action item, which is the funding request, we do rank and score each of these efforts that the EOTC is undertaking based on the goals and objectives within the strategic plan and the comprehensive valley transportation plan. So each of these projects needs to compete annually with other efforts that are coming before the EOTC in order to be formally programmed. And then again, this is intended to be a near-term focused document. And so longer-term efforts have primarily been grouped into the Tier 3 category. And the reason for that is we believe that it requires further discussion in order to move forward with some of those. Some of those are lumped in there for other reasons. But we do anticipate there being a retreat in 2022. And at this point, we're looking at the main topics of that retreat being what should we be looking at in those long-term efforts. So this document is intended to give us that prioritization that, yes, we agree with this general prioritization, and we can continue to work on those projects in the background while on the EOTC side, we have those higher level discussions in terms of longer term effort prioritization. What do we want? What do we want to see in that long term? So that what we don't want to happen is we get stuck in a long-term discussion and everything else is put on hold in the meantime. So we believe that this document prioritizes the projects in such a way that regardless of the direction that the OTC or individual boards or councils decide to go in terms of long-term efforts, that this is still progressing any of those directions. And then finally, these last few slides are just an orientation to the staff recommendation, again titled the Near-Term Transit Improvement Program. And I don't want to walk through each of the projects individually. We'll go through those next Thursday, but wanted to orient you a little bit to the document itself. Let's see, I don't think I can get a cursor on here, but the first column on the left entitled Project Name, I think that's pretty explanatory. That's intended to be descriptive. The second column is the IMS tenants. So if you recall, the Integrated Mobility System has 5 tenants or strategies. And this column points out which of those strategies or tenants are being progressed by that project. So you can see we're looking at Tier 1 here. We've got several advancing the BRT enhancements, and then we've got one advancing the HOV lane enforcement. And then the project attributes, this identifies why it's in that tier. So in this case, the blue horizontal line is Tier 1, first priority, happens to be the side that we're looking at. So these are higher value to dollar ratio or important preliminary efforts. So it's one of those 2 reasons that can place it in that Tier 1 category. And then with the relative implementation costs, the one thing I wanted to point out here is that these dollar signs don't represent actual dollars. They represent the expected relative cost of that project to all of the projects within this program. So a $1 means that it's expected to be a lesser implementation cost than other projects that are within the program itself. So 3 would be the most expensive within the program. And then the notes section points out the nuances and other things that we felt were important to identify within this document for that project. And then finally, this is only relative to Tier 1. The top 3 listed projects, again, these aren't prioritized, we just grouped them together because of this one item here. You'll notice that each of these titles have 2 asterisks after them, and these asterisks denote that these projects are to be, if this passes, would be progressed to concept design immediately following the passage of the program. So if these remained within the Tier 1, these would go directly to Mead and Hunt for development and concept design this year. So this means that we would get those renderings, we would get those schematics to then take forward to any public processes that are necessary, permitting that's necessary, and really just to increase that understanding. But it is the next step in moving those forward.
So an alternative would mean that they could drop down to Tier 3 if that's what people decided. Is that what you mean, if it stays in Tier 1?
Yeah, so I would anticipate that next Thursday we would have some discussion about should this project remain in Tier 1, should it be a Tier 2?
Okay.
And we've put a lot of thought and effort based on the studies in terms of which tier we believe that they should be placed in. But it's certainly not locked in stone, and it's all up for discussion next Thursday. And similarly, if we agree that one of these projects that we've identified that would move forward into concept plan, we think should be put on hold or shouldn't be the focal point at this point, we can move it to Tier 3 if we wanted, and then we would have more dollars available on the Mead and Hunt side to progress that concept plan. So essentially, we set up the contract with Mead and Hunt so that we have a pot of money at the end of the day to do these plans. But the more concept planning we're doing, the less money we have per plan, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And then finally, the only thing I wanted to point out here was that the relative number of projects within each of the tiers, as you can see, we've got 5 in Tier 1. If we go to Tier 2, we have 4 projects here listed within the second priority. And then within Tier 3, the third priority or hold status, we have 4 additional projects. And then within other efforts considered, these are not otherwise prioritized. We have 3 projects that we did analyze but didn't feel as though they were worth progressing at this time or prioritizing at this time. And then at the end of the document, this is a 2-page document that you'll see in your packet. We do identify a definition for what we mean by value in terms of each of the priorities, and then there's a definition for the double asterisk here at the end of the document. Maybe that was an overview of what this is. It's a little bit more complex, and I think involved than what we normally see in a staff recommendation. So I wanted to make sure that I had a little time to explain that and take any questions that you might have.
Okay. Questions for David? Steve?
So David, on the HOV enforcement one it was a Tier 1 project, there are a lot of people who ignore the HOV lanes from Brush Creek below for the reason it being that it's dangerous driving in the left lane when there's so many people speeding and weaving in and out, and it is safer being in the right-hand lane even if you only have one person in the car. So you're ignoring the HOV rules but feeling in a safer position on the highway. So I would really like that to be expanded to not only be talking about enforcement, but analyzing the safety of the HOV, the rural HOV lane from Brush Creek down to Basalt. People who don't drive on that don't realize how dangerous it is. I know that David Blankenship likes it because it makes it theoretically easier for RAFTA buses to pull out of the bus stops down there during the rush hour. But it's like, a race car race going on down Highway 82 with cars speeding in both lanes, the right and the left, way over the speed limit. Cars weaving out, many of them not doing their turn signals. People driving slowly in the left-hand lane, creating dangerous situation. To me, it's nuts, and it would be irresponsible to not take a look at that. I personally would like to just eliminate the HOV from Brush Creek to Basalt. I think it would be a much safer situation for everybody, and probably would be safer for RAFTA buses pulling out, because if you had the slower people going in the right-hand lane, it would be more predictable. Let the fast people speeding go in the left lane all the way down. I think it would make it safer. So I would expand that one personally to, to look at the safety issues involved and not just enforcement of something that I don't think is right. And I believe it's all part of the record of decision on the highway also, so it's a much more complex issue than just changing what, might be otherwise a simple thing to change. So I know I need to put that on the table again for the full EOTC committee, but that to me is something that I think we should look at personally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Other questions for David? Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I heard most of that. Some of it broke up at the end. Yeah, David, I think the issue I see with the EOTC or the HOV lane, I just think we may have reached a capacity now where it is becoming more dangerous. The speeds have gone up. The number of cars on the road have gone up dramatically, it seems, in the last year or so. And I perceive it to be more dangerous also, especially since it's completely backward from every other place, every other highway in the country. And so we know how difficult it would be to change it, but perhaps it may be an enforcement issue or something. But I think we're seeing this with the intersections coming in and out of there as well, that I think we do need to refocus some energy on that because it really has become more dire and more dangerous. Just for one brief anecdote, heading down Valley the other day, I came across a car who was in my down Valley lane, headed uphill directly toward me, like he was going to head on me, because he was not in the traffic, the rush hour traffic coming up Valley. Somehow he found his way into the down Valley fast lane. I don't know if it's related to the HOV lane confusion or not, but it just seems crazy that there's that much going on. I'm worried about it, that and the intersections as well. So Steve makes a good point. It could be in a matter of just more vigilant enforcement in there if we can't change it. Thanks.
If I can add.
Yeah, if you want to respond, go ahead.
Just
I
a
have question.
couple things. So the safety issue is certainly not lost on staff. We're keenly aware of it. A lot of us, most of us, commute up and down that corridor every day and see it. The thinking so far is that increased enforcement would prevent a lot of that weaving in and out if people think that they might get ticketed if they're in the right lane. And so the question then is how to do effective enforcement that can increase that. What that would mean was that the left lane would likely become slower as traffic would back up behind that slowest person. But the intent there, within the record of decision, Steve's right that it is memorialized within the record of decision, and it is memorialized as being in the right lane. So any changes to relocating it or removing it does require a change to that record of decision, which isn't a simple process, as we're aware. So that was some of our thinking. The other point is that you will notice in there that there's a recognition that we might need to phase enforcement, and part of that is recognizing that safety concern. So we might need to start enforcement maybe closer up Valley and possibly moving down Valley later in time once we have an idea of what the real impacts are from that enforcement.
And then David, I'll jump in here with my question. Do you have like a primer, a summary or something of the record of decision? And I guess I just asked for that because I noticed in the memo I don't remember which projects, but there were some references to some projects with $15 million, $18 million price tags. And I guess I start to wonder at what point does changing the record of decision perhaps start to get more of a better of an idea than developing expensive projects that work around or within the record of decision. And I know that's a much bigger, longer question, but if you have some kind of, just summary primer of what the record of decision entails and includes, I know it would help me at least.
Yeah,
for
I think
a refresher.
that actually the best primer I have, I was actually refreshing myself on this last week, is the staff memo that went out for the last EOTC retreat in 2019. Okay. Nothing's changed since 2019, so it's all still relevant, except for possibly the construction cost to actually complete the entrance to Aspen is probably out of date in there. But the rest of it is all still valid. So if anyone would like that, I can send that around if you don't have a copy of it anymore. There's a lot of other information in there too, but the section on the record of decision is still valid.
I'm sure I could find it. It might help for Francie and for some of the new folks on the city in Snowmass Village who were not on those councils during that time.
Speaking of that, for the March 21st meeting report that you have in there, it says George Newman, not Francie Ducover.
Yes.
In attendance.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I said something about that earlier.
I thought you were talking about the notices were going out to George, but you meant that was actually.
Yeah, in the attendance list. So I apologize. That's that has been corrected in the official decisions reached. Tom Fritstein was also left out of there as well.
Okay. I'm looking for other questions. I have a few, I guess. I'm wondering, is it appropriate at EOTC, I'll look for your guidance, to raise the question like we were just talking about with adding a counter on McLean Flats? And then also, I had approached you previously about an electric vehicle infrastructure plan for the valley. You know, I can bring both of those up under like individual commissioner comments or whatever at the EOTC, but if you see a place in the presentation that might be a good time, let me know, and I'm happy to bring up those topics then.
So both of those are currently in the list within this program. The one thing with the counters is that we identify that we need counters, but we're not to the point yet of saying we need so many counters here and there. So that would be, right now it's important that it stay programmed, so that we get to that point, so that we then get it into the annual work plan to be able to get the work done to identify that. Similar with the EV chargers, the plan that's identified in here is grouped together with parking, EV charging, pickup and drop off for rideshare, ride-hail, and looking at how we can utilize that to best encourage transit ridership. So that's the lens at which this one is looking at that. And that is also, I believe that's a tier 2 priority listed in here.
Okay.
So I think that if you think that those are important, we believe that they're important. Making sure that they remain on the list is, I think, the best thing to do at this point. But we're identifying that we need to spend time and effort on those, but we haven't gotten to the point yet of saying that we need X chargers here and so many drop-off points there. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
No, that's good, and I'll call out my request at that time when we get there. So thank you for pointing that out. Other questions on this? We have another, I think, item to discuss today. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you.
Okay. Move on to the next action item for next Thursday. This is the Maroon Creek Roundabout Reconstruction CDOT funding request. I know you all have been prepped on this already with the other county funding request that you've had. This is a request that's coming to the EOTC for $271,000 in 2022. So this is in addition to the contribution that the city's already made, the city's made, the county's made. RAFTA has dedicated funding toward this, and CDOT has a significant amount of funding dedicated toward this. So this is the last piece of money that they say that they need to be able to progress with this project. So this, as you may recall, the EOTC can only expend funds that support transit. So it was important that we establish a nexus between the construction cost and what that benefit is to transit. So worked with CDOT to establish that nexus. Don't want to go through that here today, but it is within your packet, and I'll talk about it next Thursday. I think that this nexus is important in that it is replicable to other projects or funding requests that we might receive as a part of the EOTC, specifically to projects that are within mixed traffic but still have a benefit to transit, and identifying what that transit share of contribution should be. And then for this funding request is, as you probably recall, this is part of a larger paving project on Highway 82 between the airport and Maroon Creek Roundabout. This funding request is only for the Maroon Creek Roundabout reconstruction, so it won't be going toward the repaving between the airport and the roundabout, just the roundabout reconstruction itself. And then finally, in terms of the approvals, and this is what we were talking about earlier here, Kelly, was now that the decisions are final at the EOTC, you noticed in there that the city and the town have a resolution of approval, or draft resolution of approval within the packet, and that's so that they have time to review those before that vote at the EOTC. For the county, this will come before you as a part of the third budget supplemental, because because the county is the managing entity for the EOTC budget. Okay. So that approval through that third quarter supplemental will be in place of that resolution that the city and town will sign if this is approved. And then as a part of the packet, you also have a revised EOTC 2022 budget that shows how this funding fits in. You also have a strategic plan and comprehensive valley transportation plan scoring sheet. So again, this is how on the staff side, we analyze these to make sure that the requests that we're recommending to you are in line with the goals and objectives within the strategic plan and CVTP. And it did score well. We believe that the EOTC does have funding available to fund this. this request, so we are recommending approval next Thursday.
Will we have a chance to ask questions about the Maroon Creek roundabout on Thursday? Next
You
week?
will. Andrew Knapp, resident engineer with CDOT out of Glenwood Springs, he is project lead, and he'll be virtually available next Thursday to answer any specific questions you have on phasing or detours or
Okay, great.
anything like that.
Great, thank you.
And then I did throw this slide in. I know you guys got a lot of detail last time it came before you, but as a refresher, there are two main improvements that we're looking at with the roundabout that should improve efficiency and reliability, both to the general traveling public and to transit. And those are geometric changes that should reduce conflict points, thereby increasing the efficiency of the roundabout. And the second one is changing it over from asphalt to concrete, which should prevent those biannual or every third year infrastructure failures that we've been seeing, usually at very inopportune times in February, where it's hard to do the repair. So that's where we're really seeing the potential benefits to transit in terms of reliability and efficiency with these improvements. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on this before taking questions on the update items.
I have a question, or I guess I'll give a preview of a question that you'll probably have to answer next week, is how this project works with the channelization project that's being proposed as
Right.
well. And again, I don't think you have to answer that now, but I would expect that that will come up.
I
So,
would expect that will come up. I think, just so
yeah.
for your information, so this would take place in 2022, next summer. So CDOT's moving ahead for that. Granted, they get the funding. There's no physical changes to the roundabout that are proposed with the channelization outside a temporary lane barrier
Yeah.
in the down valley direction.
Got it.
So we would anticipate that would be probably a rubberized type barrier that can be removed in the winter time, because CDOT has concerns about snow removal.
Okay.
So that would only be a summertime effort. We do still need to do some further evaluation and feasibility analysis in terms of radii, making sure that buses and large trucks can get through there even with that. But it has modeled well so far in terms of moving traffic through, and has shown notable benefits to transit in terms of moving them in the down valley direction.
Cool. No, I like it. I like the idea. I will also say, I think in our next two EOTC meetings, so October and then March, we should probably schedule time for an update on this project at both of those meetings. You know, my thought is in March, we will definitely want a preview of how CDOT's going to communicate this construction project next summer, because for everyone experiencing the horrible traffic this summer, this is really going to magnify all of that. And then in October, you know, sort of preparing, making sure they're prepared for March to come forward with what that plan looks like, would be my request
Okay.
on this. So. All right, other questions for David on the roundabout?
I have lots, but I'll wait.
Okay.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left, so it's great.
Okay.
Kelly, David, I'm surely your RAFTA is weighing in on this, just on lane widths, and remember seeing a RAFTA plan that looked like on the eastbound, right by the, on the left side there, that they were talking about maybe having more room on that side, but clearly they're part of this, so I don't need to question that. But as Kelly points out, when this happens, it's going to be a big, big deal for the community. And one of the major choke points, of course, will be the Smith Hill Road intersection off 82, which is the most dangerous intersection in the county, down to get to Woody Creek, to get to McLean Flats. And so I'm hoping that CDOT has a plan for improving that intersection before they do this, whether it's temporary improvement or something, but that intersection is already stressed. We've had some accidents there, long lines of traffic trying to get on from Juniper Hill Road or trying to get off 82 to get on to Smith Hill to cross the median and get across the down valley lanes. It's a scary situation there now, and I can just imagine when more people head from McLean Flats during this, it's going to be, we're going to have to formalize something there to make that work better. or I'll plan on picking up residence far, far away for that period of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. All right, not seeing any other questions on this item that we will discuss in more detail next week.
All right. I just wanted to open it up to see if there are any questions on the other memo items. Again, didn't want to go through these individually, but want to make time for any questions that you might have.
Greg has a hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, only that, of course, maybe it's just because I'm so proximate to them, but the Brush Creek Park and Ride to ABC Trail connection, I'm hoping that stays in high priority, and we really make some progress toward accomplishing that. And then the food truck was just a disappointment that it didn't happen this year, but I can understand with the rebuild of the Brush Creek lot happening, maybe it just didn't make sense. But I think it'll be easier when, if we, with the Head Start next year, hopefully we're going to get some people in there. And oh, by the way, on that note, I'm hoping you have a chance to meet the director of Lift Up, who is establishing Lift Up's nodes throughout the valley, and he proposed possibly doing something with a food truck or a Lift Up food distribution truck at Brush Creek, and that could possibly be something that becomes part of our plan. And it seems like now would be the time to have those conversations. So hopefully we'll get you with John Doherty on that, just so you know what they're going to be asking for. It's a mobile food pantry basically, but it could be something that has a permanent presence for a couple hours a week or something down in there, and maybe there's a space for them near the food truck or the coffee cart or whatever going forward.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Patty's convinced you want to go eat your breakfast and lunch and dinner down there.
Yeah, maybe so. Regarding Buttermilk Park and Ride, the last thing I was going to say is I'm a little concerned about what's happening at Buttermilk Park and Ride now, because I remember earlier, disconnected to this, earlier in the season we discussed putting outdoor movies at the Buttermilk lot, and as I drove by it the other day, a couple days ago, it looks as if it's a motorhome camping area now. It looks like people have taken up residence, lots of motorhomes parked out there, as if people are actually living in that lot, which I thought it was going to be a construction equipment storage lot or something. So I'm just wondering if the status of the Buttermilk lots have changed unbeknownst to us just in the last few months. And I'm not sure how that relates, but something to have on the radar. It's part of all this.
Do you want to respond, or?
Yeah, on the Buttermilk lot, so none of the status has changed out there. Those RVs are monitored pretty heavily, and as far as I'm aware, no one is actively camping out there. That is the storage component, and they are paying to store those units out there. But that is
Okay.
managed by the city of Aspen as a part of the agreement with the county.
Got it. Okay. It doesn't look like construction equipment. That's all. It looks like somebody's RV, and there's a ton of them out there. So just wondering if that's part of the actual deal we make. I'd actually rather see an outdoor movie theater there than RV parking lot, but don't know if that's part of this conversation or not.
Okay, and we can bring that up in open discussion too, Greg, if we want to get more details from ComDev. I'll note it down for us today. Any other questions on these updates? Any last thoughts?
Just to clarify, Greg, I think that you understand this, but just wanted to make sure that it's clear to everybody that for the food truck, we are not looking at having anything out there next year because the park and ride will be under construction. So we do have a one-time permit through Picken County as a location and extent permit to gather information. So we are looking at doing that in 2023 after the lot is finished being reconstructed.
Right. Yeah, I did hear that. Maybe it's for open discussion, but it is related to transit and EOTC. you know, it's funny when we're in open space meetings, we often talk about wildlife overpasses across really congested corridors where we have a high incidence of animal wildlife impacts with vehicles. And I'm just wondering, I don't think I saw wildlife overpass discussions anywhere in EOTC, but it may end up being part of that conversation someday. So I just want to put it up there and flag it, and we can decide what to do with it. But I know there's a lot of interest in discussing this, and it could be open space and EOTC and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, you know, working together to create something workable.
Yeah, on that, the EOTC is limited to expenditure of funds and time on transit. So to the extent that a wildlife overpass benefits transit and can increase that time and efficiency, the EOTC is able to be involved. But it is, in terms of wildlife overpasses, it's really more of a CDOT, other larger operational question.
Got it. Well, maybe there's a safety component we could discuss then.
Okay. Any other questions? Final preparation? No? Okay.
I don't have anything further.
All right, well, we'll hear all the details at next Thursday's Elected Official Transportation Committee meeting, which will be hosted here in this room for anyone who wishes to join us in person or online, and that's at 4 o'clock.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, David. Nice to see you. Appreciate
Yes,
all
you
your
too.
hard work. And sorry I was texting.
Thanks,
I just
David.
was checking in to see if Suzanne was joining us on Zoom or coming down for this next part of our agenda, which we will move on to. I see Suzanne is here on Zoom with us. Hi. And we're going to move on to a discussion of the Woody Creek Tavern request for a temporary seating expansion. And I just want to check, we've had quite a few folks join us in the room. I recognize the applicants. I recognize Phil Dinsmore from the caucus. I'm sorry, I forget your name, sir, also from the caucus. And I'm not sure if you folks are joining us for this item as well. Okay, so we do have a bunch of folks in the room here. Nice to see you all, and thanks for coming in today. And I'll turn it over to Suzanne to kick off our discussion.
Thanks, Kelly. Suzanne Wolf for Community Development, and thanks for telling me who's in the room because I wasn't sure. But thankful to be able to do this from my perch in Denver right now. But I'll be quick since I know there are a lot of other people who want to speak, and I think the memo, speaks pretty clearly to what the issues are with this. But the tavern, the new owners of the tavern that have been taken over, and they have requested a temporary seating expansion under the ordinance you all adopted last year, 27 of 2020, which was adopted in response to the pandemic and to allow restaurants to try and expand their seating areas to accommodate the required social physical distancing. Once you adopted that last year, we did approve that administratively, and the process was set up to be administrative by staff. We did approve one last year to do that, and they also obtained a temporary expansion of premises permit for liquor service in that expanded seating area. So essentially they were able to maintain the same, I don't know if it was the same, but they weren't allowed to expand their seating capacity, but they were allowed to spread it out, and they were allowed to serve customers in that expanded area. They requested that again this year. And that came about the same time that the tavern was in front of you to talk about their liquor license and wanting to expand their service area. And I think some questions came up at that time about what the conditions were from prior approvals on the property. And just to speak to that quickly, back in 1999, when the tavern parcel was separated out from the Woody Creek Mobile Home Park, there were conditions put on it that said no expansion of the existing outdoor dining area, no expansion of the existing restaurant seating in the tavern. A separate document basically called out the numbers associated with that, which was 49 on the patio and 67 seats inside the restaurant. So that was established at the time. When the request came in this year and the caucus had heard about the liquor license expansion, I realized I did not include the caucus in the issuance of the decision last year to allow the expanded seating. So I did send them a referral and asked for comments. Those comments I copied into the memo. Obviously, the caucus has concerns about any expansion of the seating area and impacts from the tavern on the surrounding neighborhood. I did include the information from the Woody Creek Master Plan, which again also kind of speaks to this, you know, not wanting an expansion of seating at the tavern. I've spoken with the applicant. I think they're very clear that any permanent change to seating capacity or expansion of seating will require a separate review process, and we'll have to amend those conditions of approval and have a full discussion of that. That would be a separate process. So for now, it's just the temporary request under the ordinance from last year to allow that expanded seating, but with the same capacity. The current liquor license does not include those areas where they would like to be able to seat people. So there would have to be a separate step to consider, I think Jeanette's on, she may be able to help me here, a separate, basically temporary liquor license to allow liquor service in that area, the temporary expansion of premises. So that would be a separate request and a separate consideration by the BOCC. So today's request is just related to the temporary seating expansion under Ordinance 27/2020. So given that, we obviously bumped this up to the BOCC for your consideration, but we definitely, obviously, given the concerns raised by the caucus, have concerns about whether it's appropriate to allow this temporary expansion, as well as then have them proceed with the liquor license. But are looking basically for your direction on whether to pursue that or not, the temporary expansion.
Okay. Questions for Suzanne, and then I'll give an opportunity for folks in the room to address the board. Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. So I just want to be clear that this is a temporary expansion of the premises, maintaining the same number of seats they had before, and it's to accommodate social distancing, physical distancing, which is really fallout from the pandemic, as I understand it. As the pandemic is ongoing, why would we not grant that extension?
Greg, I just think that's a consideration. It was done last year without input from the caucus, and this year, having received the input from the caucus, felt it was important for you all to have that discussion and hear their concerns.
Great. All right. I'm eager and willing to hear it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Steve.
So it appears that there are people spilling out onto the road from the reports from the residents there. And I'm wondering how there are probably people waiting to be seated, and then they probably end up waiting out on the patio. Maybe the patio is way more crowded than the 49 people allowed to be seated there. I'd like kind of an analysis or an explanation of what happens with the people who are waiting. Are they counted in the 49 people out on the patio, or what? And maybe the new owners could explain that.
Okay. I'll know your question and we'll invite them up to respond, Steve. Other questions for Suzanne? I have two. And I'm sorry if this is in the packet and I missed it, but what is the duration of the temporary request? Is there an end date?
I don't think the request included a specific end date. At this point, the ordinance from last year didn't have a time span associated with it. Mm-hmm. When we granted it last year, we basically granted it for summer of 2020. But again, I think the applicant could speak to the time frame they're looking for.
Okay. And then do you recall, did that ordinance require or rely on us being under a emergency declaration? For example, the state of Colorado has lifted their emergency declaration, but Pickens County's remains in place.
There were no findings in that ordinance
Okay.
specific to an emergency declaration.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Suzanne? Or Jeanette? I'm seeing none. I'm gonna ask the, restaurant owners. Hi, I see you. If you please come up and we'll answer some of the questions, and then we'll go, to the caucus and then other members of the public who've joined us today. Hi, thank you.
Kelly, is there a place where it's better for? me to sit?
That's just fine, and we'll have to make sure that your microphones are turned on. There should be a red light.
You can share.
We may need to swing the camera off Francie temporarily, if that's okay. All right, thanks. If you please introduce yourself and go ahead and any remarks you want to make, and then we'll make sure the questions get answered and any others. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Luke Van Arsdale at Balcom and Green, and I'm here on behalf of the restaurant owners. And the entity is Woody Creek Tavern Restaurant LLC, and it's owned by Craig and Samantha Courts Pierce, who are here with me to my right.
I think that everybody's speaking really quietly in here today. I'm not quite sure why, but I'm not sure, you can't hear, can you?
Couldn't hear? I have no idea who you are.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if everybody could try speaking up a little bit, that would be great.
Sure, I tend to do that when I'm tired, which I am, so happy to. Okay, thank you.
So I'm Luke Van Arsdale. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. This temporary seating area expansion request really is a health and safety consideration that's an outgrowth of the pandemic. It would be great if COVID were dead, if the pandemic were over. We're all looking forward to that, but the reality is we're not quite there yet, and it's unfortunate. You know, vaccinations are widely available, but we haven't reached a level of vaccination where herd immunity is established. And there's no good way of, you can say if you're not vaccinated, please mask up, but there's no good way of enforcing that. The only good way of keeping people safe for the time being, while we're still not at a herd immunity state, while we're still getting daily news notifications about Delta variant cases being on the rise in every state, is to continue maintaining social distancing. That's what this request is for. It's to provide additional area so that we can maintain social distancing without increasing capacity, so that we have a safe environment, not only for the patrons of the tavern, but also for its employees who are circulating among these guests. We really want to avoid a situation where we have an overcrowded bunch of people all crammed together in a tight space with poor air circulation. Not that the tavern has poor air circulation, but the more people you pack into a space, the harder it gets. The tavern does intend to apply for permanent expansion of seating area, and a lot of that is actually to address the issues that Mr. Dinsmore has raised. There is a traffic congestion problem. There is a bottleneck. You get three groups of 12 to 20 people who all decide to ride their bikes down to the tavern for lunch or happy hour because they hear it's a cool thing to do when you're visiting Aspen, and they get there and there's no room for them to seat, but it's not like they can just walk across the street to White House and get served. So what do? They stack their bikes up and then they mill around while they're waiting to get served, and there's nothing the tavern can do about that. To speak to one of the questions that was raised earlier, the capacity is the capacity, and once you're at capacity, you're not just packing people into the patio for them to wait. The restaurant can't accommodate them safely, and so they just have to wait until it can. If they were able to remove that bottleneck and accommodate more people, turn them around faster, there would be less of a traffic congestion problem, I suspect. But that's really a consideration for the future. It's not really what today's request is about. Today's request is about providing the space to provide a safe environment for the people who are visiting the tavern during what we hope is the tail end of this pandemic. There will be a separate request to have the liquor license apply to the expanded seating area, but again, that's on a temporary basis, and the more permanent procedure will follow up on this one. We understand you've got letters from the adjacent. We hear the caucus's concerns, and we want to be good neighbors, and we have reached out to them and will continue trying to work with them. One sort of cringes to think about what it would look like if a Woody Creek bouncer were deputized to go patrol the adjacent neighborhoods to look for dog violations going on. I can't imagine how the neighbors would feel about that. I'm not sure how much the tavern can do to address issues with things people might be doing in adjacent neighborhoods. But those are issues for a different application at a future date. For today, again, we just want to create space for safety. The neighbors, the immediate neighbors in the mobile home park, I understand, have sent letters in favor of this. And so that we ask you to approve it just so that we can help keep providing safe space for the community and for our employees. Thank you.
Okay, do you have other comments, or we'll open up for questions? I think there will be some. My question was, what is the duration intended for this temporary request?
We would like to see it go at least through the summer and fall. And we're hoping that we'll be able to have a more permanent seating expansion request processed by this winter. We do intend to submit that application. It's hard to say, and the issue with the pandemic is as cold weather sets on and people congregate more indoors, it gets worse. So we would like it to be in effect for long enough to have us get a permanent application processed. If the board would grant it for a year, that would be ideal. But the minimum period that would make sense would be at least through the fall.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Questions for the applicants?
So the expansion that you're talking about, application for later to make it more permanent, that would not include increased seating, or would it? I mean, it's kind of irrelevant right now, but I'm just curious.
Right. Yeah. So ultimately, we would intend to ask for a permanent expansion of seating, and then the capacity that could accommodate would be a question of fire code and other safety considerations that we'd have to work with the marshals to figure out. For now, there's just no request to increase the capacity. We just want to be able to have the same fire capacity within a larger area for more space.
Steve?
So including the discussion about a permanent expansion, to me, muddies the waters on this temporary permit extension right now. I'm very much in favor of an extension, because this pandemic is not over. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better across the country and parts of the world. And we're in maybe better shape in Pickens County, but we're not out of the pandemic. I'm in favor of extending the seating, the expansion of the area you can seat people in because of the pandemic. This doesn't have anything to do with whether I would approve a permanent expansion at all. So I think it's kind of confusing, the issue, to even bring that up right now. The one solution I could see that you could do that would be participating in kind of metering in the bigger groups when they come in is to actually require that they have reservations. So if a big group of people is riding from Aspen on bicycles to go, they're just taking off, riding to Woody Creek Tavern to get lunch. If they were required to get a reservation before they left Aspen, and you could tell them, well, don't show up till 1 o'clock or whatever, whatever time their reservation is. That's one thing that you could do to prevent large groups from waiting outside till there are empty seats for them to come in. So just toss that out as an idea on a potential solution for temporary when there are big crowds showing up like you described earlier.
Thank you, Steve. I agree. It seems like the talk of permanent application or an increase in capacity muddies the water, and I apologize to the extent I engaged in that. I was trying to make exactly that as the bigger point. We're not here today to talk about those things. This is just about expanding space for health and safety. And the reservation system is a good idea. It's something that we really appreciate you putting out there, and it's been discussed and it'll stay under discussion. It's always a tricky business proposition because when you've got a remote location like that, you can have a policy, but if people don't know about it, once they show up at your door, what do you do with them? And that's always the consideration. People hear the tavern, it's a laid back place, and they're visiting Aspen, and you can ride your bike there, and they don't necessarily call to see whether reservations are required. They just hop on their e-bikes they just rented in town, and they halfway pedal out there, and they show up, and they're hoping that they'll be given the hospitality that they expect from Pitkin County, Colorado. And so anyway, it is a good idea, and it's definitely something that the owners will consider in figuring out how to manage the business.
I have a question. How are you managing the line queues to maintain that social distancing now?
We're currently not open for business, so we haven't had to do that. But we'll operate similarly to how we do the other restaurants, with people coming in, tables spaced adequately apart, and
I guess I'm trying to get at the question that Steve raised that I don't think has been answered regarding the spillover. If the patio is being used for seating guests, what happens to the queue of people who are trying to?
It's tricky because what can you do as a restaurant owner in terms of managing people's activities off of your site? So you can only permit so many people into your licensed premises because you have capacity issues. And where people are off-site and they're not at your premises, there's only so much you can do to be responsible for them. And really the answer is you're as responsible as any other member of the neighborhood. And primarily the responsibility falls on the individuals to...
Sure. I'm guessing the caucus will have some ideas. I thought there was some space set up across the street that let people mill about. I don't know if there's like directed bike parking. It's been since like May since I've been down there, but probably right before you closed.
So just one thing to bring up, you talk about lines and queues. The Woody Creek had an extremely small kitchen before, and through this process we have now made basically the kitchen, we've improved it, so we think that our turn times will be a lot faster, whereas before you would have people coming in and sitting down, and it was taking much longer for them to get through lunch, where we feel like now with the efficiencies of our kitchen and so on and so forth, we'll turn the tables faster. Mm-hmm. So we don't feel like it's going to be maybe as bad as it was before, because people were waiting an hour, and my wife and I are hoping not to have people wait that long. We'll be able to see people and get right on it. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, I hope we can do that.
Sure, for a bunch of reasons, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Good. Francie?
I don't really have a question, but I just want to say this is not a new problem for the tavern. This has been going on, I've been here 30 years, and it's been going on for 30 years, probably longer before I came. So I'm not sure that this request to have expanded seating during the wind down of the pandemic implies that it's your responsibility to deal with the bottleneck at Woody Creek. I mean, I just can't even think of a time in the summer where I've been on a bike or in a car where it wasn't just a complete cluster of kids and bikes and cars and people. And I think some of the appeal is the restaurant, and some of it is just that it's called Woody Creek, and people want to go to Woody Creek. So I just wanted to point that out, that I don't think you guys are responsible for the entire congestion at Woody Creek, and I think that that's probably, our decision is, I don't think we should weigh our decision too heavily on what's been going on since long before you guys got there, so.
Okay, thanks, Francie. And Suzanne, I just want to clarify, since this is an administrative decision of ComDev per the ordinance that we gave you those powers, we are providing this direction today. It won't come back in any formal decision making, right?
Correct. For the temporary seating, the liquor license issue, I believe, would come back to you. Jeanette could speak to that.
Okay, okay. Any other questions or any other comments you'd like to make? Or okay. Greg, thanks. Go ahead, Greg.
Hi, thanks. Thank you. It seems like a pretty simple thing to extend a temporary, a permit given the pandemic, and I know that's what's being asked for here. But in light of the improvements you've all made to the tavern, you've increased the bandwidth, you've increased the capacity of the kitchen, you're expecting tables to turn faster. That's like the ideal scenario, is people come in, they eat, and then they leave and make room for someone else. I know some people love to linger, so I have a feeling that what we're going to see is more people trying to run through this operation, which means more people on the road and in the area. And it might not be your responsibility, but certainly I think we may be creating a more dangerous situation with the Woody Creek Road. And I would have to say, I think I could imagine approving this permit, this temporary permit, but saying, hey, it's time to go to a reservation system now. I look at Pine Creek Cookhouse, or Cloud 9, or Krablunik, or even the Maroon Bells and the Conundrum 4-Pass Loop. They're going to permit systems because they've got a problem. They've got too many people who want to be there. And I don't think it would take too long for the concierges and the bike shop rentals in town to let people know you can't just jump on a bike and go down to the tavern unless it's maybe an off hour. So I think Steve's suggestion of a reservation system, this may be the time to experiment with that, because if we grant you an extension, if you get this extension, that may be your time to really do some experimentation on what's going to work. So I'd say think about that as we go forward here. I am concerned about increased capacity volume there. I know residents have been concerned about just how people come off the Woody Creek, the Rio Grande Trail to get to the tavern, and there may be an alternative to make it safer and get them to a parking area that's quicker and easier just by going down valley a slight bit farther. That's been brought up with Gary Tenenbaum and Open Space already. But we probably do need to think about traffic and people management. The idea of having a waiting area that's across Woody Creek Road, to me, is crazy. Lower River Road, that just seems crazy. And I would actually suggest we look at the possibility of reorienting that road, if there was any way we could do it, to push the parking lots that are across the road over to the tavern side. So could the road hug the bank more and create some parking or a little bit of a buffer in front of the tavern, i.e. more property in front of the tavern for a waiting area or for parking? I'd love to look at that. A road realignment may be impractical, but maybe it is possible. It would slow down speeders, and it might increase a safe waiting area. Those are my comments. I don't think I have any other questions for Craig and Sam. I hope wish you luck. I wish you were open already. I've been wanting to go there for about the last month. So I'm concerned about it. maybe implementing an experimental reservation system now, or alerting the public that might be in the future, might actually help relieve some of the pain that the Woody Creekers are feeling and increase safety as well.
I have another comment.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Francie?
I have another comment too. If we, when we do the Marine Creek roundabout and we have a detour through Woody Creek for traffic, that's gonna be a nightmare over there. So maybe that would be, before that would be a time, Greg, to look at the alignment of that road, given that it's gonna probably be bumper to bumper next summer on Woody Creek. So that might be the impetus needed to get you a parking lot on your side, and keep the traffic off your, keep the people from crossing over, because crossing over will be impossible next summer, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we have some other folks to hear from on this. Any other last thoughts? No? Okay, great to have you here, thank you. And I'll invite the caucus reps to come up, please. Sorry, and I need to talk louder.
Stay here so we can have a conversation.
I think they've invited you to the table.
Phil Holstein is with me also. For those who didn't know Phil, Francie, I've never met, and Phil Holstein's with us also. Nice to meet you.
And you are?
Pardon me, I'm Bill Dinsmore.
I thought so, okay.
I'm Bill Dinsmore. I'm the moderator of the Wood Creek Caucus. I was so impressed with the comments from the commissioners, all of you, about how deeply and how thoroughly, historically, you recognize the issues that are down there. And Steve, your suggestion that reservations might be appropriate. I happen to have managed Krabloonik for 7 years in the olden days when it started, so I have some familiarity with a destination restaurant and the need to have reservations to control the flow of business throughout your business hours. Pine Creek Cookhouse, I think, is an excellent example of a destination restaurant that has been forced to control their business plan up there through reservations. I think reservation would be a terrific idea. Now, implementing it for Craig and Samantha will be a challenge. Woody Creek is a challenge. It's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge. More popularity, as Greg mentioned, more bandwidth. The faster you turn them, the more people are coming through there. That doesn't solve the problem. That exacerbates the problem. This is a this temporary situation is what we're talking about today. Greg, you're right on that the benches or pop-up tent areas on the other side of the road is absolutely the wrong idea. That just brings more conflict with people wandering around on the road, waiting for that table. So at the very least, I would like you all to consider, and Craig and Samantha, consider eliminating those tables that are across the road. That clearly just brings hazard into it. I think also your comments about this is a great time to begin to address the issues that there are too damn many people coming down to Woody Creek. How are you going to manage that? The notion that everybody involved in this today, are going to throw up their arms and there's nothing we can do, it's just too damn popular. Well, clearly that can't be the answer. Next summer, Francie, we have no idea how awful it's going to be. We know it's going to be awful. We don't know if it's going to be a 10 or 11, but it's going to be awful. And I think the suggestion from Greg that this is a great opportunity for the remainder from now until the end of the summer and in the fall to experiment with all sorts of ideas to begin to address the concerns that we all know exist. There are too many people, there are too many bikes, there are too many cars, there are too many dogs, it's too damn busy. Reservations might be one that provides some relief for the community. It also might provide some operational clarity for Craig and Samantha about having some notion about how many people they can anticipate coming down. That was an enormous help for me, for Blunick, to know exactly how much I had to prep for every day because I knew how many reservations I had to accommodate. Those are our concerns. We're not talking about the temporary issue. We understand that addressing the ongoing problems at Woody Creek, whether it be this temporary solution because of COVID or going forward, or still exists, I think this is the opportunity to demonstrate for the new operators, to demonstrate that they're gonna have to do something to control this. The previous people didn't. We complained to them regularly. I know what their motives were. At least I suspect what their motives were in the last years of their operation there, and that's to maximize their income. They let it go to hell, and it went to hell at the expense of the people living, particularly in the Woody Creek Mobile Home Park in Woody Creek. And I think the notion that there's nothing we can do, we collectively can do for those issues is just unacceptable. But at the very least, Greg, thank you for mentioning that those little pop-up tents across the other side of the road is not an answer, at least in the near term, for this problem. So that's our comments.
Thank you.
I don't think George knew what he was creating.
You know, George liked chaos in some ways.
Yes, he did.
George liked chaos, so he embraced chaos, but not at the expense of the quality of life. He was still a Woody Creek lover. So yes, but chaos not at the expense of the quality of life of the people who live down there, and that's what's driving us.
Okay, are there questions for Bill? Okay.
Really? Okay.
So I just I'll ask my question. So I'm
Thanks, Kelly.
inferring that the opposition is not to the temporary expansion that retains the capacity number.
Only those two
From the-
pop-ups. Only
from
those
the
two
caucus.
pop-ups across the street. Yes, you're right.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members? Okay, I don't see any right now. I'll invite, we have other guests to come on up here.
Oh, no, I'm just hanging out.
Is this the one? Or that one?
wherever.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm Peg O'Brien. I live right behind the tavern in the Woody Creek Mobile Home Park. And I have been the moderator of the Woody Creek Caucus, founder of the Woody Creek Free Clinic, member of the Woody Creek Homeowner Board of Association, co-founder and board of director with the Metro. So I'm pretty familiar with this situation. And from my perspective, the tavern is the gem of Woody Creek, the anchor of our village, and the most important commercial customer of our Woody Creek Metro District, which takes care of our water and sewer and roads, etc. The new owners have proven themselves as great neighbors over and over again, showing nothing but respect, sensitivity, and support to all concerns and projects brought to their attention by the neighbors and the Metro and the Woody Creek Caucus. I was at the recent meeting of the caucus and saw good interaction. The owners are willing and able to bring the tavern up to the standard necessary and expected to serve the residents and visitors of Woody Creek and rural Pitkin County. So I recommend you consider passing this, what they bring before you. So that was my formal statement, but because of my history, I would like to submit a few other thoughts. As I come into Woody Creek and travel through on the road, on Upper River Road or on Upper River Road, which has been addressed and brought up today, I treat it as one big crosswalk full of wildlife, and the wildlife happens to be humans. And if I do that and open my heart that these are all wonderful people, and wherever they come from, they're very smart when they are there, and here they're guests, they're our guests. And then we slow down, and it actually, we've talked when I was the moderator, and we still talk about traffic calming there, and we have actual human live traffic calmers if we treat it that way. I do not actually see a problem with how it is running now. The Rio Grande was paved. When I was the caucus moderator, we were not for the paving. And we were told that was to bring the amenities up to a standard expected by the visitors. And now we have a paved trail going by. So if we have that, it makes sense that we're also able to provide services expected by the people that brings through Woody Creek. You know, we've had to open our hearts, and now we know who we are there and what we're doing. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Peg. Any questions for Peg?
Well, I just wanted to say to you, Peg, that I think we all love the Woody Creek Tavern. And I think that it's important that we recognize that we really don't want the road to be the reason that the tavern doesn't succeed. I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense at all. So I think, I do think it is incumbent on the county and the people in Woody Creek and the people at the tavern to make this work. It's a wonderful business and everybody loves it. So I'm pretty sure we can come up with some ways to make it work, but I'm not sure that I agree with you that the way it is now is the way it should be in the future. I mean, yeah, it's fun to drive through there at 5 miles an hour, and we probably should have a 5 mile an hour speed limit there. It would be a lot safer. But I think we can do better.
Thanks, Francie.
Thanks, Francie. Any other questions for Peg from board members? Steve, you can always use the raise hand function if that helps. Okay, I don't see any. Thank you for taking the time. Oh, Greg. Greg, you're always so late to the switch. I'm moving on and you're waving at me.
I think very slowly, Kelly. I'm sorry. I'm only lightly caffeinated. Peg, I just wanted to ask Peg, because you've been there behind the tavern all these years, or in the immediate vicinity, it's really gratifying to hear you say that the new owners have really responded and reached out, and as I would expect, knowing them, as I would expect they would. What is your take on the waiting area that's across the road? I mean, it does seem like, to me, that always seems kind of scary, because there's usually somebody walking across the road. If there are people in waiting at all, you're going to have people out there. Do you think there's any way we could fix that? Is there an obvious fix for that? Being a resident who's on the ground there a lot?
Yeah, and I've been there since 2004, so however many years that is, I've been right there. Thanks for that question. Personally, as a resident of Woody Creek, the most dangerous thing for me in Woody Creek are the fast bikers who come through there. It is terrifying, either on the trail, on the road, on our little back streets. That I wouldn't mind any kind of intervention to stop them from racing through, trying to get their time down to Basalt or back up or whatever. They are terrifying. I do not find the visitors a problem. I kind of pretend it's a preschool, we're in the middle of, it's simply what it is. And when I was the moderator, we worked with Gary Tannenbaum and Brian Pettit, and we ran a lot of different scenarios on moving the road and putting planters in the middle of the road, and they all may be better options now than they were back then, because that was 10 years ago or a little bit more. But in the end, the county wasn't able to find a way, we just weren't able to make headway, so I let go of that because you get exhausted. There was no change to be made. So instead, just accepting, if not embracing what we are and who we are there. And I will say, since the new owners have been at the tavern, there's been a real wonderful impact of more open, connected, and healthy actual neighborhood, because they've initiated conversations, they listen to the answers, they are at the metro meetings, listening to what's going on, trying to find ways to support every project we have going. They're right there swinging with us. They are part of the community, which is a 180 from what the tavern has been with the most recent owners. And it is so welcome. So, and to my, as an individual there, I'm not telling anybody else how to think, but they bought the tavern. They are investing to make it really work. and they are investing a lot of time and attention in the community. So I really appreciate and support them.
Thank you. And I see Steve turned his video on. I guess he has a question. Steve?
Well, maybe more a comment. I've been thinking about the comparison between the road in front of the Woody Creek Tavern and the dirt washboarded road here in McCarthy, right in front of the two business drinking establishments here in town. And it's really an interesting comparison because the road here is full of people walking, dogs playing and lying in the middle of the road, little kids walking about. There are lots of people on four-wheelers driving back and forth, lots of people on bicycles, and some people in motor vehicles. And everybody has to slow down because it's as you said, Peg, a wildlife crossing, but it's kind of just a menagerie of all different things happening in the street, actually, here in McCarthy. And you have to drive slow and don't try to go fast through that part. And maybe that's part of the solution for Woody Creek. I like your idea on the wildlife crossing comparison. So that gives us more things to think about. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
Thanks.
I don't see any other questions. Thanks so much, Peg. Did you want to join us? Come on up.
Hello, good afternoon. Gus Phyllis, Woody Creek resident. Let's see, I have a letter here from the Woody Creek Metropolitan District, the Met District, and it was sent to the board. I don't know if you all have it or would like it read or...
Go ahead. Maybe not everyone saw their email this morning.
Okay. Dated July 19th, 2021. Dear Board of County Commissioners, it was brought to our attention that Woody Creek Tavern liquor license expansion is under review. We would like to offer our support to the Woody Creek Tavern and its owners, Samantha and Craig Cortez Pierce, and favor the consideration of expansion. They have expressed great interest in the community and how their business may affect residents and have been proactively planning the best solutions for us all. We believe they will take responsibility and action if necessary should a disruption in the community arise. Sincerely, Woody Creek Metro District Board of Directors. Okay, and then personally I have been involved in local Woody Creek government since 2006 as and then now it's the Metro District Board, but since it was a HOA before in various capacities, most of which have been direct liaison with the tavern owners. And over the years, until last year, it was with Kevin and Laura, who every year we would have a little bit of a issue, but mainly not the Woody Creek Road. It would be in the community roads off interior roads within the Metro District. And it had to do with taxi drivers, and it always came up around the 4th of July, and we always came up with a solution, and it's congested area. So you end up having to live with as Peg spoke of, the wildlife during the season running the area. And as also of my recollection, I don't think anybody has been hit in the last 16, 20 years I've been around the Woody Creek area in that congested zone there. We used to have 2 humps, 2 dips, and a rumple strip. Now we have 4 or 5 humps, I think, and they work. Traffic does move neatly through there in front of the tavern, and also from post office to the north end by the Liberty Lane side. And let's see. Oh, and the pop-up tents across the way, that seemed seemed like it worked out fine. Yes, it is a crosswalk there, essentially. There take a lot of white lines to do the whole area. But people generally are courteous and step aside to let you roll through there. And I do live directly around the corner, maybe 150 feet from the tavern there. And yeah, the issue has been less with the bikers than the taxi drivers, but that's pretty much, taxi and limo drivers, that's pretty much a similar thing because they are ferrying the bikers up there. One other thing that came up, the reservation system. Personally, I would really not like a reservation system as I step out and go over to my other living room to think that, oh, I could be turned away at any day or moment of the time. Well, it might be an issue for some of the neighbors.
I wouldn't want that either, Gus. I get it.
And generally, tavern patrons have been great in the neighborhood. Sometimes they do wander into the streets or they're playing with their kids on the sides in the streets, and they're welcomed in the neighborhood. It's not like they cause a problem. They're on vacation, and some of them are on vacation from all the way up Assault or Carbondale with their kids. I don't ever see it being a problem with them taking pets. I mean, I'm sure it's happened that somebody's brought their pet behind the tavern, but I don't see that as an issue. And I support the tavern, and I appreciate the measures that have already been presented to kind of ease up the congestion in the neighborhood itself. County Road, that is less of a deal. It does slow traffic there, but the slowest traffic's between Buttermilk and the Circle.
That's the truth. And not as pretty.
All right, are there questions for Gus? Giving a seconds for Greg to catch up here. Any? All right, Gus. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone in the room has had an opportunity to speak, and I'll go ahead and bring it back to the board on discussion. So we're discussing the request for temporary extension of premises, and we've heard that they'd like this to go through summer and fall minimally, and then we've heard some potential conditions that we could consider, and I'll just list off what I've noted down, and I'll check in, and then we can have board discussion. And Suzanne, let me know if I've missed anything you may have caught. So what I've heard is a reservation system, getting rid of the waiting tables across the road, some designated bike parking, or perhaps expanding or better signage, some traffic calming measures that could include stripes, flower baskets in the road, revisiting some of the discussions Peg's had in the past, finding ways to slow the road cyclists and address concerns with taxis and interior roads, and then perhaps long-term road alignment conversations that the county could initiate to help solve this problem. So let me see, Suzanne, anything else you heard that we should discuss? Okay. All right, I'll open it up for board input on any of these conditions, or none, or all. What are the thoughts here? Greg, and then Francie.
So I would like to propose certainly that we grant this extension. I think that's an easy thing to do. I'd love to hear what other people think about attaching a condition that they perhaps experiment, if nothing else, with the reservation system. But I'm also thinking that I would like to see the county circle back and see if we can move half a lane over into that parking area and create a half a lane buffer in front of the tavern, well, probably in front of, I'm going to say, what the equivalent of about a block and a half or two between the rumbles, or between the bumps. I'm looking at it on Google Earth right now. It's possible the alignment of the road could work to create more space in front of the tavern. I know it's not cheap, but it's perhaps a temporary, traffic calming and space creating measure could go into place, perhaps just for the summer, that could help us come up with a solution that makes a safer space around the tavern. Those are my two suggestions I just wanted to put out there. Looking at the map, it's like, oh yeah, this would be easy. I'll draw it for you right now. But I know there's more to it than that, Suzanne. You're not even smiling. And so I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay. Other input from board, sorry, Francie, you had your hand up, go ahead.
Yeah, I would totally be in favor of approving the extension of the permit to have the expanded area. And Bill, I just wanted to say that I think the whole valley is full. It's not just Woody Creek. We're full everywhere. Carbondale's full. Glenwood is full. So it's a really big problem that's way bigger than this conversation, but just wanted to say it's not just Woody Creek.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Francie, do you support what Greg has offered? Is there anything additional?
I don't
elements you'd like
support
to-
the caveat of having a reservation system. I think it takes away the spontaneity of the place, which is a large part of its identity. I understand the reasoning behind having a reservation system, but it's not quite such a destination location as Criblonik or Pine Creek Cookhouse, and I don't feel like it's our job to impose that particular regulation on the tavern, but definitely I would be in favor of extending the expanded area.
Steve?
Yeah, I too favor the extension of the temporary expansion with no preconditions that means permanent approval of an expansion. I'm intrigued by Greg's idea. I'd really like to look into that. I don't think it would be necessarily a half lane. Moving the whole road over there temporarily would be a calming device, because people would have to kind of turn into where the parking is now and then turn out of it at the end. So that would be put in a traffic calming device, putting a little S-curves in, the Woody Creek S-curves, we could call them. So that would be something I think we should investigate. I like the ideas that have been tossed out here. I hope we can just continue having the conversation going forward and try to come up with a solution, or a long-term solution. So that's all for now.
Okay, Steve, what are your thoughts on a reservation system?
Well, I'm sympathetic to the local people who are used to just popping over there and walking in the door and sitting down. Maybe it would be large groups, large organized groups would have to have reservations, might be a solution. So if there are 6 or more people going, or some number, it would depend on the sort of the table seating arrangements. But if there is almost a these are almost catered bicycle groups. They'll rent a whole bunch of bikes, they'll ride down there, and then they get picked up. They don't ride their bikes necessarily back to Aspen. Those are the groups that I see needing reservations, not the local people just walking in to their second bedroom area to visit with neighbors and whatnot.
I hope not too many people are sleeping at the tavern.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Steve.
Okay, And I'll just say, you know, I think there's some, like, we can all come to the table here today to try and help solve this, right? So I want to help direct, I think, county staff to look at better calming measures that could be done in the short term and in the long term on this. And then I want to, you know, personally honor, I think, the caucus's preference that we get rid of that waiting area across the street to minimize the crossing back and forth between the restaurant and that area. And then I want to ask the applicants if they have feedback on the request for a reservation system for large groups. Because I think all three of these together might strike a balance in trying to improve that situation. And so if you'd like to respond, I'd invite you to come up now.
Well, I'm a resident of Aspen for 30 years now.
Can you come up? Yeah, I'm sorry. We have to hear you in the mic for the broadcast. Thanks.
So I'm a resident of Aspen for 30 years, Craig about 27 years. We've been going to the tavern the whole time, so we know the animal that we're talking about. And there's been no reservations for 40 years in the restaurant. And people, right now, the tavern's closed, and there are hordes of bikers that are there every day that just show up, you know, knowing they don't need a reservation. So a reservation system, I don't think, is going to deter anybody from coming down in the daytime. People just go on rides. Right now, everybody's riding. The bike shops are sending them to the Tipsy Trout now in Basalt, where we're closed, and then picking up the bikes. I think that there would be a lot of pushback from town if there were reservations put in at lunchtime. We have talked about experimenting with a system at dinner, but I don't know if it's feasible at lunch, because there's just people know they haven't needed a reservation for 40 years. Sure. And we really don't intend to do big groups, because if you book big groups and then other people ride their bikes down to come and have lunch knowing they need no reservation, sorry, we're already booked, this group has a party of 20, and then your locals will never get in. Mm-hmm. So I just don't really see that it being feasible to have reservations at lunch.
Mm-hmm. I know I was shocked not to have to pay cash recently.
Hey, Kelly, may I
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
ahead.
It's also worth pointing out that nothing about the current request to expand the area, the seating area, has any impact on or relation to traffic at the tavern. Increasing the seating area on a temporary basis it's not taking away any parking. It's not doing anything to instigate new traffic. It's not exacerbating any existing bottlenecks. It's not helping alleviate any existing bottlenecks either, but it doesn't change anything about the traffic pattern there. The traffic pattern there just is what it is. And all that the applicant is asking for right now is a little bit of extra seating area so that they can more safely space people out. So it seems like the traffic issues are, you know, they're problems that need to be addressed, but it doesn't seem like they need to be addressed in the context of this application.
Sure, I get that. Oftentimes, these are how problems get discussed and brought to our attention. So I appreciate that. So I do want to check in with the board on the feedback we've received on the reservation, the discussions related to reservations. Steve and Greg. Steve.
Well, I would not make it as a condition. That would be, to me, more of a business decision, which the owners would have to make that if they want to. Sounds like they thought it through quite a bit, and I'm not going to impose that on them. But based on our conversation, maybe they will reconsider or consider it some more.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Greg?
Yeah, I'll go along with Steve on that, Kelly. I think that if this is an opportunity to find out what does work, and I kind of think that Sam, with all due respect, the argument you just made is the same argument the Pine Creek Cookhouse or Cloud9 or any other restaurant that has a lot of congestion and traffic would have made. It's like, oh, this has never been done before. We don't need to do this. So I'm not convinced that that's the solution, but it's your call. When the application comes back to us, which I assume it will, hopefully all these problems have been solved. So I certainly will vow to go into it with an open mind and wish you the best with it. And I'm hoping that the neighbors and everyone else down there is comfortable and confident in the solution that you find. And so all I can do is ask you to consider it. But if it's a bad idea, I'm happy to be disregarded. Okay, so that's where I am with it. Good luck.
And I'll just jump in. I do, we have a reporter in the room. This is an opportunity to sort of freely advertise if the tavern's now going to require reservations for 8 or more, So that's an opportunity perhaps foregone. But I still think that type of approach could serve as a traffic calming measure, even if it's not addressing the conditions on the ground currently. In terms of the expanded seating capacity. So it is your prerogative to consider it for this. I think it would be something to test and come back with more information about whether it works or not for future discussion. Our board has to, I think, determine the duration of this approval. Or not. Suzanne, I don't know how they've been worded in the past. Should we set an end date for this?
I think so. I mean, I've, tried to put some time frame on it. So yeah, I mean, in terms of what direction you might have, like I said, last year it was just summer, which I think I would have considered summer through fall. But I think it's helpful to be specific.
Okay. So I'll just offer through the end of 2021. Does that cover your requested period? And I'll see if the board agrees. Seeing head nods.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, so I think here,
Can I ask Bill one more question before we finalize this? I just wanted to.
of course.
So when you speak for the caucus, I'm not quite sure, I mean, I read your letter, but I'm not quite sure how you feel about the extension of the temporary expansion and whether you guys are opposed to that or you're just opposed to greater seating in the future. I'm not quite sure.
No, we're not opposed to the temporary COVID expansion, no.
Okay.
In the future, we'll have a future conversation about when they apply for a different liquor license.
Okay.
Control area. But I do share the commissioner's concerns, or at least Greg's concerns about the little pop-up there on the other side.
Mhm.
I don't think that adds to, I think it makes it more confusing for the customers down there to have to navigate that street back and forth and
Right.
maybe unaware that there are dangers there that they don't perceive.
So would more seating right in front of the restaurant on that side of the street be just waiting seating?
I don't know where they would put that.
Yeah, I know, it's not much space.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got, it's pretty well maxed out, but
Yeah.
Craig and Samantha can figure out if they want to remove those planters or do something else. But that's to be considered when they offer another application for their liquor license.
So the way it stands now, the way we're proceeding, you're okay with that
The
basically?
temporary,
Except for this-
yes, the COVID extension, yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not hearing any additional conditions to be placed upon this. You've heard some requests to remove that. I don't even know if the tents are still over there from last year, but I don't think that was a condition of our prior approval. And then we have separate direction for staff to think about some traffic calming and start communicating with the community down there about that. And that's not part of this approval. Does that sound good? Suzanne, are you clear?
I think so. I mean, if none of those are conditions and basically it's just, doing it through 2021, the other pieces would be separate conversations with GR, Public Works about the road. And I know those conversations have been had in the past, so, they can he'll be able to, talk about what they've looked at before. So I'll definitely bring that up with him.
And thank you for forwarding this for our discussion, Suzanne. Okay, so I think your approval will be forthcoming, and Suzanne will complete that through community development, and we wish you the best of luck. It's a treasure, next 40 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, nice to see everyone. It's great to have members
Bye,
of the
guys.
public here.
Thank you.
I don't
Good
mean
luck,
to get
guys.
In your bedroom, Gus, I mean, geez. Or your living
Okay,
room.
so obviously this conversation required time, so we gave it the time it needed. Would commissioners like a break? Would you like a few minutes? How long? 5, 10? We'll take a 5-minute break, and we will be back to talk about our P&Z applicants. All right, be back in 5 minutes, Grassroots. Thank you. welcome back to the Picken County Board of County Commissioners work session on July 20th after a short break. We had a long conversation about the Woody Creek Tavern, and so we are behind in our agenda, but I'm sure we'll make up time. So we are going to move on to our board discussion about our planning and zoning applicants. And Rich, do you want us to give us an overview on this, or I think we can refer to the memo?
I certainly can. Charlotte won't be attending today. She's going to tune in, and she'll be able to go off the direction that you all go. If the decision is made today on your appointments, that'll be combined with the resolution for the citizen grant appointments on July 28th. So that's based on your decision today. That will be the outcome.
Okay, and so we have, let me see if I'm summarizing correctly. We have one planning and zoning appointment vacancy to appoint, and we've had 4 applicants for that, and Charlotte sent out the links in case anyone needed to go back and look at those interviews. And so now is our time to discuss who of those 4 we wish to appoint for our final P&Z vacancy. And let's see. We had interviewed James Vishansi a while ago as part of his application for reappointment. And then new applicants were Christine Ramello, Kevin Mickelson, and Ivan Kassar.
Could you remind us who's on the board now?
I can, and I'm happy to share the screen too. Just
Thank
give me
you.
a second. So I'm pulling this up from the July 6th, where the whole roster was attached to that agenda.
I can, Kelly, if you want, I can help you with the AIS, that Justin Nieberg, who replaced the renewing applicant, which is James Vinchanci.
I think I got it.
And
here.
Justin had learned it shortly after the appointment. He couldn't accept that position, so.
Thank you.
So, and who was previously on it? Monty and, can you remind me?
We reappointed whose expirations were this year. We reappointed Monty and Thompson and Joe Kraybacher, who also reapplied and re-interviewed to get reappointed.
Okay,
And then we newly appointed Suzanne Caskey.
okay, yeah, that's right.
And then we also newly appointed Justin Nyberg, but he had to withdraw. And so we went back out for applications for that final vacancy. And so the 4 folks that I listed are
Okay.
for our consideration for this vacancy. And then if you look ahead, we'll be doing this all over again next spring.
Yeah.
For another 3 spots, I think. Okay, any thoughts?
I'll venture a thought.
All right, Francie.
I would recommend that we go back to James and ask him to stay on the board. It was hard for us not to the first time around, so. And I was just looking at the list, and I know Zach is pretty young, and I don't know Jasmine or Chelsea or Cliff, but just thinking about balance and bringing in new blood, and I know that Suzanne will be a really amazing addition, and so anyway, that's kind of where my heart is.
Okay. Other thoughts? Greg and then Steve?
Yeah, at reviewing all these interviews and knowing some of these people a little bit better than others, I feel pretty comfortable. I think we've got some good choices here. I would like to see a fresh face coming in here, and I have to say, not taking nothing away from James. I thought he was a good guy. He contributed a lot to the board. I think Kevin Michelson has a strong problem-solving background, and I really appreciated that in my conversation when we interviewed him. And he's been here a while. But I have to say, I think when it comes down to philosophy about where I, personally, I really liked Yvonne as well. I thought Yvonne was a little long-winded in his interview. He was under influence of he had a cold medication or something. He had a severe cold. So, it may not have been his best day in the interview, but I felt like I knew where his heart was. And so I'm leaning toward one of those two, Kevin or Yvonne. I didn't, with all due respect to Christine, I don't think she's honestly been aware of what P&Z does long enough, or been here long enough, or actually really been connected with the community long enough to be considered. I think she needs to do some time in the community before we put her on a board like this. Her business isn't really related to Aspen, and she hasn't been here that long. I really appreciated her coming forward, but I just don't think she's in the right, she's applying for the right job.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
So in looking at all the interviews again, I'm going to turn my video off so maybe you can hear me better. I want to make sure you hear me well. The two who presented the best with their knowledge of the P&Z and what they do and the issues that are in the community right now were James and Kevin. We're definitely, well-versed in the things. Granted, they are both kind of in the industry. They're, one being a builder and property manager, one being an architect. So therefore, they know more automatically. Now, we were trying to achieve more diversity by not necessarily just getting another attorney or another builder or something. And, to be honest with you, some of the people on the board, occupation is, so I don't know if by appointing an architect, if we would be getting more diversity or not, but I think, getting Kevin in there for sure would be someone who kind of knows the ropes. He tended towards liking smaller size houses, just because that's what he works with as an architect, is building smaller houses. I think the house size question we asked of all of the applicants, and there were answers to that were important. I have not made up my mind yet which one I want to support, but give my thoughts on the type of person we want to have to appoint.
Okay, thank you. And I will say I did ask Patty for her input. She'll be here when we approve these, and she had said that she would be happy to reappoint James, and then preferred Yvonne, and then Kevin. So I don't think we're considering Christine. I'll just say I thought she didn't quite have clarity about the role of P&Z at this point. And so maybe in the future we'll be a little more informed and engaged to reapply.
Kelly?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, asking about the mix in the board. I know Jeffrey Woodruff is an architect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe Jasmine is, and Monty. I'm not sure if Monty has an architecture background or property management. It's been a while since we talked to Monty.
He's a builder.
What?
Builder, thank you. Okay, so we have a builder and architect on there already, an attorney. Suzanne's a retiree at this point, but she's been involved in so much in the community. And then Jasmine has been here forever as well as a community member, if that helps.
Thank you. When I was thinking like diversity of the board, you're getting at to this sort of diversity I was thinking of. I'm like, I want more diversity of like thought and representation and in like community values and concerns, and all of that is sort of one of my hopes as we head into this big GMQS conversation that this board is truly like reflective of the scope and span of the values and concerns for the community. And so, I really liked the way Yvonne kind of presented the big picture thought, and was, has both interests in the resort economy and really expressed strong nature of character about the community, and balancing all of those concerns and keeping sort of the big picture questions in mind. He may be less excited about dealing with specific planning applications that come to the board, but that's where I'm inclined to support. And my hope is that, and my anticipation is that James will continue to have a strong voice through the Brush Creek Caucus, and I fully expect that our caucuses are all going to be engaged in this policy conversation over the next year as well. Greg.
Kelly, if it helps, I would certainly give a stronger argument for Yvonne as well. You kind of remind me that the thing I really did appreciate from him is philosophy and big picture. And I think I mentioned it before, but you kind of drove it home, is that the concerns I had about him were more about, detail, which can be picked up. Maybe he knows less about that because he hasn't been directly in that industry, but he certainly is a long time and committed community member, and I think that weighs a lot. So I'm guessing I would put him in my first position.
Okay. So we're sort of having some split votes here because Patty and Francie want to reappoint James, and you and I have given our nods for Yvonne. And so, Steve, today is the day.
So, Greg, I had to run out because my battery wasn't connected properly. Were you talking about Yvonne right then? You were.
Yeah. Yes, I was. I having heard what Kelly just said, it did remind me, and I do know, James is now going to be fairly, I think, very active in our new Woody Creek caucus, and so he's a voice in the community, and he'll be with us. I think Yvonne has been here for a very long time, involved in many different facets of our community, and I think philosophically he gets Aspen while not being directly involved in the building or architecture, design, or real estate community, and I find that to be refreshing and really very important for me.
So one thought, I'm glad you pointed out that Jeffrey Woodruff is an architect. He lives at Gateway Mesa. Kevin Michael lives at Shield Oak, just up, almost the same neighborhood. Two different caucus areas now, too similar. So I will say that I would support Yvonne also for my first choice. And I think I'd put James as my second choice.
Okay. Yes, Francie.
I'll be happy to go with Yvonne. I do think that somebody with an eye towards change is what we've been looking for anyway, and so I'll go with that.
Okay. All right, I think we have our direction, and again, we'll be revisiting this in probably 6 short months, and so we can invite these applicants back at that time because many of them were strong if we don't have people reapply. Okay. So, Rich, Charlotte's direction is to prepare the appointment for Yvonne Kassar.
Got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right, and look at that, we're making up time. The next up is future agendas. And Rich, did you have any items to pull out?
Yeah, I do have a note here that Charlotte made a note that she's checking with Andre Gar to see if she can join an open discussion on July 27th to give an update on the Redstone marketing.
Give an update on the.
That's what's being done with the dollars that the BOCC approved.
Okay,
Oh,
the
that,
Redstone
okay,
marketing, yeah.
okay.
Is that all right? That's all I've got as far as notes go here.
That's Redstone Marketing, the marketing.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you said market, and I thought, oh, really? Do they have a market up there? Okay, thanks.
Marketing.
She's probably gonna want to chime in on short-term rentals too, if she's here.
Okay.
I just want to remind you guys, I won't be here. But I will try to access later the short-term rental discussion.
Okay. Let's see. Red Ranch Acres. Curious what that is.
And also, I spoke with John about the second item, the compensation discussion, and I will let you know about that and what I thought about that. I don't know whether you guys are gonna just,
Sure.
you know, the way I feel about what he recommended here.
Okay,
Okay.
maybe you and I can talk offline. All right, so we will have 3 meetings as a board next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Folks have any questions or concerns about future agendas?
Wasn't much specificity in the future ones.
In the future ones, but
Yeah.
let's see, next week. I am curious where this housing impact fee is going. I know what I hope for, but I don't remember what how that conversation ended up, because I think I was driving back from Santa Fe when I joined you all. And let's see. And we are continuing the Pandora application, I think, to August. Is that correct? I think Suzanne had said on the 28th of July, we will talk about the noticing and kind of some details about bringing back the application, but we won't actually consider it. Okay. Okay, let's see. I will know, I took some notes today, Rich, about some items for us to find some time. I think now might be a good time to bring those up. Probably these might all be updates from ComDev, quite honestly, but we were hoping to get some more detailed information regarding the buttermilk lot usage and whether that is in fact being used for construction parking. And they may need to get with City of Aspen to provide that update to us, but that came up in our EOTC discussion. And then some other items that came out of our morning exec conversation, but we can talk about here, are hoping to get some updates from ComDev about the status of TDRs. You know, where are we at? We're hearing that they're being issued, they're really high value right now. You know, I think we have questions about, are we creating more? Have they created more out of rural and remote that are done administratively and don't come to us? Are there applications for constrained lots that we're gonna expect to see? Where are they being landed anywhere, or are people just buying them right now? So can we talk about where that additional development is expected to be generated? What else? I'm looking to the board if I didn't fully capture our conversation, our
I
interest
think there was
in this.
discussion on values also. I don't know if there's a way of capturing those or not, the value of those.
TDR value. Yeah, Kelly, if I could, maybe can a fraction of a TDR be transacted? That'd be a good question. Are there other purposes for them we could come up with, short of
Yeah, affordable
developing where
housing.
we don't want people? I think there's it's time for a review and a philosophical discussion about them. We know those can go on and on. Maybe that should happen at the Woody Creek Tavern over a beer. But I'd be interested in participating in that because I'm still at a loss for, to understand the value and how they're transacted and where is this going. We've established an economy based around TDRs, and I think there are probably some side effects that we need to understand. So that's what I'm hoping to learn more about.
Right. Are we seeing competition in rural and GMQS competition in rural and remote for development rights that are then getting transitioned into TDRs?
Yeah, it's the new Bitcoin. It's our Pickens County Bitcoin, TDRs.
Well, I guess the question was, if TDR is intended to neutralize a piece of rural backcountry ground that shouldn't be developed for a number of reasons, and it gets landed on another rural piece of backcountry ground to build a much bigger house, we're shifting the problem from one place to another, but we haven't solved it. And I know a lot of people are very concerned about that.
Steve.
I know that John McBride has some other ideas on how to use TDRs. I can come up with lots of ways to use TDRs as an incentive for people to build smaller houses and then reward them with a TDR. But if we don't come up with more uses for TDRs, besides the two that we have now, we don't really want to generate a bunch more TDRs. So I think we should get John on. I've told John he needs to be involved in the discussion this fall anyhow, that to get his ideas in there. But that to me is the crux of keeping the TDR program going long term, is to come up with other things people can using around the growth management quota system to get their building permit.
Greg.
Just on that note, if you're thinking, John McBride, I know who's expressed his TDR concerns to me over the years. I'm just wondering if who else is out there that we might like to invite or open it up to have a conversation about them among people who are observers in the community. I appreciate John McBride, and I know there are others out there who would probably want to weigh in as well or offer some insight.
Yeah, I think Cindy has heard from a lot of people, and this will be an integral part of our growth management conversation. And I know I think she's still in Alabama, so I'm not sure she can weigh in right now. But Francie.
I'd like to have somebody from Down Valley be included, like Chuck Ogilvie or somebody like that. So we have the perspective from the whole valley, not just the Up Valley.
And I do, so we're going to be scheduled to hear kind of a history of the growth management. That was on our agenda, I think, for next week. And then because Francie wasn't going to be here, and I think Cindy's still maybe out of town, we're rescheduling that. And I just wanted to check in because when, Cindy and I think we were out for a walk or something, we were having some initial conversations on what this could look like. And she had some really great ideas, I think, about doing a bigger community presentation on growth management and sort of maybe combining it with some other just sort of art stuff, and maybe she has some film excerpts from the Hunter S. Thompson documentary that came out, and just the setting of the conversation of the political kind of heat related to growth management history in Pickens County. And I thought it should be like a joint meeting with us and P&Z and, or maybe something more community oriented. And I just wanted to sort of throw that out there for the rest of the board, if you have any ideas or preferences on this, you know, rather than, if we want to just schedule an hour overview of the history, we can do that. But if we want to do something a little bit broader and more inclusive, we could probably do that too.
Presentation or conversation?
I think a presentation and, you know, maybe some sort of kind of mingling along with that, but I don't know if that would be like a kickoff
I'd be up for
event or
that.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be up for a broader conversation that would have a little bit more depth in it, because in an hour is going to go by and we're not going to really scratch the surface. And really what it comes down to for me is, you know, where do we as a community want to see this going in the face of what has really been some significant growth in numbers of people coming and possibly staying or coming and recreating in droves. The pressure is on the entire state. It's on every mountain town and every resort town in the state. We're seeing it across the board. How are we prepared for that? And I know every other community is having this as well. And many other tourist mountain communities are certainly having this conversation because they all perceive an intense growth pressure. And so we've got some great tools. Maybe it's time to review them and learn about what's happening elsewhere and think about how we're going to go forward. I'm eager to hear what people in the community think, because I think the pressure is there. So certainly we can devote some energy to it. And it may even mean getting the Aspen Institute to help us, or, you know, these big long processes we always have to, I roll my eyes thinking about them, but they really have use and utility for something that's this important.
Thanks. And then I just did, Greg, I thought I'd check in with you, but I'd like to get on a future agenda. I'd love to hear from the biodiversity initiative and, you know, what they're finding and, you know, if they have findings to report at this point. You know, it's been a couple years since we approved funding, and I know they've been busy in the field, and it's just, again, this timing of like, what is our carrying capacity? You know, I was having a conversation with Francie, like what objective metrics can we look to determine like what is harm and how can it be, you know, ameliorated and those kind of things. So I'm just curious to hear an update from them.
I'll put out the feelers. I'll get a hold of Tom Cardamone and ask him. I think we're waiting to hear back from them. I know they're still working on it and have been, because I've been kind of saying the same thing to him. It's like, come on already. You know, where is this thing? We need this. Yeah. I'm not sure it's going to be as broad in scope as what you suggest here, but certainly it could help. And we could also be looking at just the absolute numbers. You know, it's so funny, people in Aspen, to pick on Aspen, talk about, oh, we're just a community of 6,000 people. And you think, that is so wrong. We've got 54,000 at last count, if you're counting the daily tally, people coming and going. And if we're not thinking of it as 54,000, we're kidding ourselves. And that is very sobering. So I think it's the biodiversity is super important. Wildlife corridors comes up again. But then also just the human traffic through here has changed in astounding ways in the last few years. And so I'd like us to have help looking at that.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was talking with John, we were talking again about having a second retreat. And I think when we talked about it in February, we were thinking of it in terms of the whole growth conversation. So depending on what happens in the near future with him, but he's got it on his radar to help us schedule that. And I think that given the depth of this conversation, and I keep hearing new depths come up, you know, like today when you were talking about actually collecting metrics that help us define what we're talking about. When is it too many? When is there not enough water? Like that town in Utah in the New York Times today that said, no more people, we don't have any more water, no more people. It's the first town in the United States that's done an absolute hard line. This is the end. You know, so there keep being new manifestations and consequences within this conversation that if we want to go anywhere with it, I think we're going to have to schedule some pretty significant time. Maybe another 2-day retreat or something that we're all willing to participate in, and then we can have people like John McBride and some experts and people come in, and that's what I would push for.
Okay, any other future agenda items? You have to
And
see, I keep
STRs
looking at my list, and we've made some pretty good progress through it.
That's great.
This
And
year.
STRs are kind of a part of that.
Yeah.
I think that should roll into it,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. It's not separate.
All right. We've already taken a break, so let's go ahead into open discussion. Rich, do you have any open discussion items for us?
Yeah, Kelly, I do, and I guess this could flow into future agenda items eventually for you, but just wanted to give you a couple of heads up. There is a need to, Kelly, you may be receiving a DocuSign from CDOT, and it is a $14,000 expense, and what that it'll be related to is an intern program out at the airport. It's something that we've been doing for quite some time. The money's budgeted. Just CDOT just needs to send out an authorization for Dan to make that application. So it's an ongoing program, not a problem, program that we have been successfully hiring out of that. We've had interns come in, and we've hired from that pool before, and so that's working out really well. So I just want to give you a heads up that that's coming. It is budgeted, so it's not an impact. We'll just need your signature on that. And then also Dan is going to be bringing forward, he's made applications similar to what I did with the Carissa funding, which was the second round of federal dollars. He's now applied for the third round. And that is an additional amount of about $263,000 associated with concession relief. Our first round was about $65,000, and they're going through the process right now of seeing how that can be distributed, who would be applicable to receive the type of relief. So we've got Recondo working on the different aspects of that. And then the other part is more, certainly a lot larger. It's $3.9 million, and it's all related to operations, personnel, cleaning, sanitization, janitorial services, all associated with COVID, which we do have, and we've had impacts. In fact, some of it could even go for debt service payments, which we don't have, but it's pretty broad in its usage. So we'll be coming forward again with those formal documents to the board. It'll take a resolution for that one, and Kelly, those will be headed your way also for a signature.
Okay, thank
And
you.
then the last one is Kevin Warner sent out an email on the 19th discussing the maroon bells in the Snowmass Wilderness fee proposal, and I believe the board was copied on that. But Kevin is wanting to schedule time with the BOCC and also do a Q&A with you. So again, that's kind of related to a future item. He's thinking about maybe August 17th or the 24th. But just want to put that on your radar as well. And other than that, that's all I have.
Just a question on that last one is, should that be a offer for a joint? Should we invite City of Aspen to join us on that one, maybe?
Certainly could with the board. We can check with him and see if he's doing something separate.
Okay.
He may be doing something separate with them, but maybe a combined Q&A might be good. So we could certainly see.
Greg.
I'll ask.
Oh, thank you. Yep. Greg.
Yeah, thank you. I just was looking, I got an email from Rick Ballantyne regarding a demonstration of the Pano fire, artificial intelligence fire system. I think that's going to be this Thursday at 2 p.m. at the firehouse. And I received an email on that. If you haven't, I'll make sure to share that with Charlotte. She can disseminate it. The other one is that on the 28th at 2 p.m., which is one of our work days, is James Gilliam's retirement party out at Public Works. Put it on your calendar between 2 and 6. He's been here forever. I'm sorry to see him go. And then there was one more with Kevin Warner. FYI, we've set up a meeting, and hopefully Kevin is going to be there with Forest Service personnel and the BLM, Corps, maybe some ski company, a few people to talk about this methane mitigation project in Coal Basin. And that is going to be on the 22nd. Small meeting, not a site visit. Hopefully a site visit will be coming up at the end of the month, and we'd be invited to go on that. But for the meantime, just wanted to let you know that I might see Kevin sometime in the morning of the 22nd for a meeting representing Corps, and we plan to have a county person there too. Probably, I think maybe Ellen Sassano would be there as well. It's like dipping the toes in with BLM and the Forest Service and the county on more about this Coal Basin methane. And Chris Kasky is the lead on that, is measuring the methane with a much more powerful measurement tool tomorrow. So weather permitting and everything else, we'll have much better data to present on the 22nd. So I think that's what I've got for open discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any other open discussion items? Steve? Yeah.
So I it's kind of an announcement, but I was appointed to be one of 2 state coordinators for the state of Colorado for an organization called Elected Officials Protecting America, which I had responded to more than a year ago to just trying to get veterans who are elected officials involved in that. And I've actually spoken 2 different times at national press conferences with this organization. So they are just now beginning an effort to reach out to elected officials across the state of Colorado to get more elected officials involved. So a lot of it has to do with climate change, taking strong action steps to deal with climate change because it's affecting our national security. Also dealing with some equity and social justice kind of issues that are out there. So they're going to be reaching out, soliciting more county commissioners and town councilmen, state legislators to be actively involved in this effort. And they are, in Colorado, they're sort of concentrating on the CC4CA counties and municipalities right now as, the most likely candidates for elected officials at the local level who would be the first ones interested in that. So just to give you a heads up, there will be more information, and I can get more information to all of you, but there will be solicitations for getting more people involved in this effort.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And thanks for your service. Any other open discussion items? Okay. I am not seeing any, so we have some time here for department updates and board membership reports. That's what we have scheduled for. I am up first here, so I will start. And Francie, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
So I'm sure I'm gonna not cover it all because APSHA. So APSHA has a lot going on. This group has really dug in. I will say, I think being able to move some of the appeal processes to a hearing officer process has really freed up time for this board to do policy discussion. Because I feel like in the past it was like 1 meeting a month we were doing, quasi-judicial cases, and then the other meeting of the month, we were doing policy and it wasn't enough time. So we've extended our meetings to 3 hours, starting at 4 o'clock every first and third Wednesday. And have taken on some topics related to standards for sellers. So really, again, you know, we all heard from, I think, the folks at 16 Ajax, and that was just one example of kind of how the system has had practically ensured that sellers would get their maximum value, appreciated value on their property despite its condition. And there, of course, is just some inequity and lack of fairness in that. And so even though the current rules do require life safety things to be fixed prior to a sale, our discussion has really tried to figure out how do we beef that up and how do we sort of assign whose responsibility it is, whether it's currently the seller to absorb all of it, or if they are able to sort of have some, appreciation that can be assured to them. So that conversation's ongoing. We've given direction to staff to come back with some models for us to consider on that. The rule changes that will take effect include the requirement for an inspection prior to sale, which has only been a recommendation up to this point, but starting August 1st, any sales in the inventory will require it and APSHA will pay for it. And then, from that, we'll figure out how to assess the cost of any repairs, et cetera. And then we're also having conversations related to retirement, number of years worked in the community before eligible for retirement, same with disability, and so currently it's 4 years. There's discussion about whether that should be extended to 10 years. I believe Snowmass Village's affordable housing program requires that you have worked in the community for 10 years before you can retire in your unit. There's discussion about transfer of ownership to dependents, both prior to death and then subsequent to death, and how that works in the system. And then there's discussion related to lottery chances, and currently right now folks who are of lower income can bid on upper income categories, and so that really kind of skews the playing field for the folks who are in the upper income categories who can only bid on that category that they're in. And so the recommended rule change was to allow people to be able to bid on the category they're in and then one income category above, but not more than that. And so that should, that actually protects people from buying into something that's more than they can afford, which leads to some of the long-term degeneration and integrity of the units for folks who can't keep up with the cost of maintenance based on their income. And it also gives more equity to the people who can only purchase at a higher income level to get better chances at winning those lotteries. So we're hoping to see a little leveling in the playing field with that. So a bunch of different policy. I just ran through like a whole bunch of different policy changes, and an offer has been extended and accepted for a new executive director for APSHA, Matthew, and his last name is escaping me. He is a former State Department employee who has worked missions all over the world, and will be sort of bringing that problem solving and that sort of learning in regulatory agencies to APSHA, and he will start in October. Did I miss anything on APSHA, do you think?
That's way more than I would have said. Nice job.
And, feel free to bring concerns about APSHA. APSHA really lacks public cheerleaders, even though I know there's a bunch of them out there in the community. We still struggle to have, I think, public participation. I don't think we've had more than one comment at any of our rulemaking hearings. Despite its, I think the paper's done good reporting. I think we've notified people that they're going on. So there's just sort of this silence out in the community about the changes that are being made and affecting people. Greg.
Yeah, Kelly, I was just wondering, any report on how the automation system has gone for? I know that, the software rollout, all that stuff. How are we doing on that? Are they on schedule? Are they Are they using it?
Mhm.
What's the feedback? Any news on that?
Yeah, and I won't be able to give a comprehensive update, but it is being used. There's sort of different functions that went live at different times, and I think some that have not yet gone live. But that is where people go to fill out their new qualification packets and submit new materials and make bids and those kind of things. So I know at least that part of it is functional and being used. And staff is still helping people transition to that and still accepting paper copies at this point as part of the transition. And I'm not sure about the reporting. I think there's some functions of it that you can download reports from the system as a member of the public or as staff, but those I don't believe are fully live. So there's more rolling out of the system that's happening.
Oh.
So, yeah, Francie.
Did Centennial come up at all in the last meeting? Not at all. Okay.
We're still in exec on that topic, I believe. Okay, so that's APSHA. CCAT's on a little bit of a legislative break from the summer, and they had their summer retreat that covered the topic areas that CCAT's interested in, which is sort of financial reform, wildfire and environment, public health, behavioral health, housing. I think I'm missing something. And so now the focus is going to be transitioning to the interim task force that the legislature identified at the very end of the session to help with the federal stimulus money that will be coming through Colorado. I have applied to be appointed to the housing task force, which has room for one commissioner and one housing authority board member. So I sort of applied under auspices of both. And that will be appointed by, I think, the Speaker of the House. Julie McCluskey made a referral of me to the Speaker. So we'll see how that all pans out. And the task of that group is to figure out how to spend the $400 million that is coming in American Rescue Plan funding in the state. So that's what CCAT's focusing on, is sort of promoting their candidates for the multiple task forces right now. And then I don't have any updates from the roundtable currently. The last meeting was in June. We talked about the update to the water plan, which I shared with all of you all in advance of our Colorado River District joint meeting. So you all are updated on that. And so I'll move on. Patty's not here. Steve, do you want to give any updates on your board appointments?
So there are some upcoming things, kind of save your dates almost at this time. And I'm going to jump around from not necessarily on one of my appointments, but on August 5th from 9 to 11 in the morning, there is a meeting in Summit County. It's going to be an in-person meeting. It's kind of a listening session from the Strategic Action Planning Group on Aging to find out about things in our AAA area, so Summit, Pickens County, Eagle, Grand, and Jackson County area. And I think the focus is actually on housing for seniors, might be part of their focus at that meeting. Anybody's welcome to attend it. That day I will be in Fairbanks. I can be on that, on a Zoom call for that. CCI on August 19th is having the Mountain District meeting from 10 to 2. That's going to be in Gilpin County, so either in Black Hawk or Central City, I presume, for that meeting. This Thursday, there is the first meeting of the opioid settlement task force for this region with Garfield, Eagle, Pickens County, Summit County involved in our region for deciding how the settlement money will be distributed and expanding the size of the group to bring in more experts. And I know Nan Sundin has expressed an interest in serving with that group as, in an official capacity. So I will be advocating for her to be included in that. Club 20, this Thursday and Friday, there will be more of the committee meetings for partly determining the policy for Club 20. I don't think I'm going to be able to attend possibly either one of those this time. Rachel has been good at attending those also. So, our area will be represented. Senior Council's meeting tomorrow at noon, or at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm looking forward to getting back. That senior center is open and operating, and I think they're probably up to full schedule now for meals. If anyone wants to go to the senior meals on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can do that in person at full capacity now at this point. So that's been a long time coming for that. And that's really all I have right now. Just a reminder, looking at my calendar, we all received a know before training link from the IT department, and we're all supposed to complete that training by August 9th, which I haven't done that yet, but just a reminder to everybody. I presume we all get to do the same training.
Thanks for the reminder. Any other updates, Steve? No?
That's all I can think of. If I think of something else, I'll jump in.
Okay, I'll just say
I'm looking through all my notes here.
I think I was a bit tardy, but I did submit the CCI legislative form for the RET.
Okay, good. Yeah, I did think of that, and I guess I was presuming or hoping that somebody had sent that in.
All right. Greg.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to start at the back of the list first.
You got a lot.
Because I already told you that we've been in touch with Kevin Warner via CORE and BLM regarding a meeting just on coal basin methane mitigation. And we'll let you know how that goes. There'll be more to report after that meeting. Going back to, since we're on CORE, last CORE meeting was on the 15th, so I should remember it well. 5 days ago, seems like forever. They discussed, the county's share of REMP dollars, and we're wondering if other special projects come along, would there be additional funding? And they're asking this everybody of that. And in particular, for instance, with the coal bed methane as an example, if we need to do a NEPA process, that's not part of the CORE, with the budget that Cindy was working with regarding our contribution. And I've talked to John very briefly about, the county would be running the NEPA process if it comes to that with BLM, Forest Service. It's a wilderness area, and it's mineral extraction, even though we'd be mitigating coal bed methane is considered mineral extraction. So it's going to be complicated, and stay tuned on that. CORE also initiated an interesting project that we're looking at, and that's with these manufacturers of mobile homes. I think I've brought it up in these meetings before. We have some mobile home manufacturers who are rising to the challenge to do affordable housing in the state, but in the various temperate zones in our state, which are divided up, in the Western Slope in particular, the standards are different for energy efficiency and insulation and all that. And so I think we're going to be looking at and trying to work on ways to perhaps bring legislature in to really come up with a better standard for development of mobile homes, because if you can affect home development at 1,000 homes in a pop, with what these factories are planning on churning out in a year, we might be able to make a real difference in energy conservation and getting to our state's goals. So stay tuned for that. Let's see. The State Energy Office is expecting, we're hoping that they're going to be receiving federal funds, and we're hoping and planning to have some shovel-ready projects so that if the funds become available, they have to be used in a fairly quick period of time. I'm not sure how soon, but it's something that we need to be ready for. So CORE is working on that. Affordable housing upgrades are on that list. So that's the short from CORE. CC4CA, Kelly, you may be as much in the loop or more than I am on this. I'm just looking at correspondence regarding planning for the fall retreat for CC4CA, prep updates, which will include check-ins with legislators on greenhouse gas reduction strategies. And then they're going to be, I haven't talked to any of them about, I think we're going to be doing interviews, where they'll be interviewing us about what's important. And I haven't spoken to them about that lately. There's more from CC4CA, but I don't have it in front of me. I did invite them just to listen in and participate if we're going to be talking about mobile home standards. It seems that they would play a big role, and I know Kelly and I've had a very brief chat about that as well. Do you want to say anything about CC4CA, Kelly? Nope. Okay. Well, we can come back. There'll be more time.
I mean, I will note there's just a couple of programs that CORE and CC4CA I think could, I'll try to be helpful with, as far as linking CC4CA with the Division of Housing folks who manage the mobile home standards. I said I would suss that out, so I have to follow up with you. And then CORE, I'm trying to get more info for them, but they might, on their own, try and give DOLA a call and find out about the Main Streets Revitalization Program, which is a grant for state stimulus funding that can be used on Main Street building, energy efficiency improvements along with other things. I don't know if you have to technically be considered a Main Street community, which is like a formal designation. But that would be funding that we could probably help them procure to do things like lighting along the commercial core, lightings in the commercial core and upgrades to commercial kitchens and things like that, if that would interest them. So I'm also trying to find more info for you on that.
Thank you. I'll circle back with Mona on that. It's probably on her radar, but I want to make sure.
Yeah.
QQ, I have not been in touch with QQ and haven't heard a word, so we're betwixt and between with them. Board of Health, as y'all know, we've been very active. The Board of Health made Jordana Sabella our director of public health. So she has been promoted from interim director, and we recognized her for what really was a well-done job during a very hard time in the last year, and I think we're going to happily go forward. It was a good opportunity for the Board of Health to weigh in a conversation with her directly, and it's amazing because of things happening so fast and furiously with the pandemic. Honestly, a lot of people just really had not had a chance to talk directly and ask questions and hear back. That time was never really available, and that included me as the vice chair last year, and now as the chair. So we're going to be more. We're all planning to communicate more this year now that things have calmed down a little bit. But we're also looking at the Delta variant, which, as everyone knows, is starting to be the dominant variant, and it's taking its toll. When we last checked last week, there were 600 cases in Mesa County. Pitkin County had only 2 residents that had it by then. It's probably expanded a little bit since. So we're monitoring that. The nice thing to know is that when you look at the charts, it turns out that we follow England in terms of following the curves. If they have a curve about a month later, we're going to have a similar curve, is what we've seen. And what we've seen from our vaccinations is that the death incidence curve is not following the incidence of catching the disease, which is a clear demonstration that the vaccines are working. And that's all the proof I need to keep promoting vaccination. And on that note, one of the fun things that some people at Public Health came up with is the Vax Bike. They borrowed a popsicle bicycle from the city of Aspen, and they turned it into the vaccination bike, and they park it around town in certain places, and behind it nearby is a table with nurses and doctors occasionally and public health people to answer questions, and they recruit people. You can walk right up where you can make your reservation and get vaccinated on the spot, and that has been successful. It's not the massive vaccinations we've seen this last winter when we really had a huge effort, but it's working, and we're getting. When I was with them last week, we had a full mix. We had construction workers, we had recent arrivals from Central America, we had undocumented people who were quite nervous about coming but decided they had to do it. We had locals who had just been too busy to come by. And the most gratifying thing were all the locals who'd been vaccinated and came up just to say thank you to the public health people that were present. And I was able to observe that and receive some of that, and it was gratifying to be thanked after a really tough year. And I told them to make sure that the thank yous went to the entire Board of Commissioners as well as the entire Board of Health, because we were all in that together, as was the entire community. So that's Board of Health for now. RAFTA had our retreat about a week or so ago on the 10th, and really the most significant thing that came from that, with some great history on where RAFTA came from and how it got started. The most significant thing is, I think, the highest issue of most importance was for us was mitigating climate change, doing our best to address climate change, using our incredible transportation system to do that. And the interesting conversation came down to, well, if we're going to build a new building for RAFTA, do we spend a lot of money making it net zero, or would we rather buy more electric buses? And so there's the philosophical conversation, where do we get the bang for the buck? And happily, we have a smart staff that are working on that. In addition to that, they're also looking at, traffic patterns and the maroon bells and all the things with the high incidence of people on the roads, and how do we make this bus system better? And so far, I think RAFTA has been really a pleasure to be on, mostly because the leadership from Dan Blankenship is just remarkable. He's a remarkable CEO, and I hope that he sticks around a lot longer. But he's already been there for 35 years, so I'm hoping he sticks around. But he also has a great succession plan. His comment, which I'll share with you, is a quote from St. Francis Assisi. And he says, "Number 1, do what's necessary. Number 2, do what's possible. Number 3, reach for the stars." I thought, well, that's good. I could put that over my bathroom mirror, so something to look at in the morning. So I think that's it. RAFTA is doing well. RWAPA, not much has happened since I last reported. I don't have anything for you with RWAPA right now, other than that the IGA has been agreed to. John Ely's agreed to it, and I think it has to go circle around the other counties again to make sure that they agree with the changes that we put in it. But we'll have an IGA fairly soon, I think. And that brings me back to the BLM and Forest Service, and I'm promised to keep Francie in the loop on this. I've had a couple conversations with Larry Sandoval from the BLM. Mostly it's just about scheduling. They want to be there at the table with the Forest Service when we talk about coal bed methane mitigation. They don't want to go on a tour or even have a meeting unless the Forest Service is there, because they're going to be joined at the hip in our response with us, Pitkin County, and some other partners in our response if we come up with a mitigation plan that we deem to be workable. And that is it. The last one is that I understand that Secretary of the Interior Holland will be coming to Grand Junction. We just heard that today. And she's going to be discussing the CORE Act, along with fire mitigation and I think energy issues, and also probably get a pitch from our senators about keeping the BLM in Grand Junction now. So we'll see what comes from that. And that's all I've got for you.
Cool. Thank you, Greg. And Francie.
Well, today is the Water Conservation Board meeting all day and tomorrow, but I'm here. But I might go down for the barbecue depending on how long it takes me to get out of Aspen. And I will attend tomorrow, but it's like maybe half a day tomorrow or something. And I have nothing new on the West Elk Loop thing.
I think it's a pretty quiet board. So,
Hey,
Greg.
could I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's one more thing I forgot that I think is important. Just on our vice chair brought this up at the Board of Health meeting, Krista Giesel, Dr. Giesel. And through the pandemic and since, we've seen a 20% increase in narcotic use, mostly fentanyl. It's in the region. It's not really here in our community, but they anticipate we're going to see more here. And there's going to be a public effort to expand the reach of the naloxone, I may have said that backwards, which is the anti-narcotic that will reverse the effects of a narcotic very quickly. And they're going to be, making sure local providers, schools, have this capacity. There's been a 29% increase nationally in, I think, overdose or addiction rates due to fentanyl. So it actually was a relief to not be talking about the pandemic constantly with the Board of Health and getting back to the things we were talking about beforehand. Addiction, opioid addiction was certainly one of them. So I thought I'd share that just so you know we're looking beyond the pandemic while still being in it. Thanks.
And I would just note, Steve should have more information to share as he gets into this discussion with the opioid settlement. I think I received some things from Jenny Lyons on our public health team because I was curious about it. She did say that we have Pickens County, Pickens County has one of the highest prescribing rates for opioids in the state of Colorado.
Wow.
Which I found to be really interesting. And amazed that we don't hear of more overdoses here due to that. But anyway, more to come, I'm sure. And Steve, go ahead if you want to jump in.
Yeah, if you could forward that email to me, I'm not sure if I got it or not.
I think you were on it.
I have to periodically go back through my emails because I'll miss things because there will be so much that. But if you could resend that, Kelly,
Sure.
I'd
Yeah, happy
appreciate
to.
that.
Yeah, I'll send it to Charlotte to send to the board.
Hopefully it's related to skiing accidents
Right.
and not abuse.
Yeah. Yeah, that isn't, I'm not making any judgments about our doctors. I just thought it was interesting. Okay, any other news for the good of the cause? All right, thanks all. It was nice meeting with you this week, and our next meeting will be next Tuesday for another work session. And we have APSHA tomorrow for anyone in the community who wishes to tune in to APSHA at 4 o'clock. Those are broadcast on Grassroots Now as well. All right. Thanks, colleagues. Have a great week, and we'll talk soon. And thank you, Grassroots.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.